Today is the mock exam, where students are tested on their speed because passing this exam qualifies them to take the academy entrance exam. When our protagonist's friend takes his turn, he gets distracted and ends up scoring only 70 points. The instructor comments that he is lucky since this is just a mock exam and not the real thing. Finally, it's our protagonist's turn. He bolts forward in a flash, his movements smooth and precise, leaving everyone watching in complete shock. This is because Shen Yu uses skills and techniques from another dimension. As a result, he earns a perfect score. However, his bullies become jealous and decide to teach him a lesson. Unfortunately for them, Shen Yu is no longer the same person. Our protagonist reveals that he entered this world the moment the original Shen Yu died. As for those responsible, our protagonist makes up his mind. He will enter one of the top academies, grow stronger, and make sure that every person and noble still plotting to kill him will meet their end at his hands. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to the day our protagonist first entered this world. He wakes up in a hospital room, questioning his sanity. A mysterious door is floating right in front of him, leaving him completely confused as he wonders if this is some kind of magic. Without thinking, he reaches out and unintentionally opens the door, only to immediately fall through it. Just like that, our protagonist comes face to face with a colossal skeleton that looks like the final boss of a dungeon. Not wanting to find out how strong it is, our protagonist wastes no time and runs for his life. He immediately exits through the mysterious door and slams it shut behind him. As he watches, the door vanishes. At that moment, a mysterious voice echoes inside his head, congratulating him for becoming an awakened and informing him that his ability is called World Link. Naturally, our protagonist panics and begins questioning where the voice is coming from. Seeing his reaction, the voice tells him to calm down. It explains that it is communicating with him through telepathy from another dimension. Since the connection is limited, it urges our protagonist to listen carefully if he doesn't want to die. Still confused, our protagonist decides to follow the mysterious voice's instructions. The voice tells him to pull out a strange statue from his backpack. As our protagonist examines the ominous statue, the voice explains that it is actually a curse. Someone deliberately placed it on him in order to kill him and harvest his soul, but somehow he survived. This revelation only confuses him even more because this isn't his original body. In other words, our protagonist has reincarnated into the body of a boy named Shen Yu. For some context, the original Shen Yu had already been killed by the curse summoned by the statue. At that exact moment, our protagonist's soul from Earth took over the body after receiving a ticket from Truck-kun. The mysterious voice then reveals that because the curse failed to kill him, all of the power it had accumulated over millions of years from stealing souls has now become his. As the statue begins turning to dust, the voice explains that this is completely normal. It then tells our protagonist that the mysterious door belongs to him and instructs him to summon it again. The moment he does, the door reappears. A window suddenly pops up, granting our protagonist a title called Polite Person, a gray rank title. Titles can be equipped, and this particular title causes anyone he meets to have a slightly favorable impression of him. Our protagonist interprets it as a passive equipable skill. Suddenly, the voice warns him to be careful. Its power is fading rapidly, but it strongly believes that the person who tried to kill him will definitely return after realizing he survived. Before the voice disappears completely, our protagonist asks why it is helping him. The voice replies that it needs his help. It explains that the realm our protagonist first entered through the door is known as the Nightmare Realm. It wants our protagonist to grow stronger and eventually return there to free it from its imprisonment. In exchange, it promises to reward him and wishes him luck, hoping he doesn't die before then. As the voice fades away, our protagonist reflects on his terrible situation. He has only just arrived in this world, yet someone already wants him dead. What's even more confusing is that after searching through the host's memories, he discovers that Shen Yu never wronged anyone. Still, there is nothing he can do about it right now. Instead, our protagonist decides to explore the Nightmare Realm again in hopes of obtaining another title. Although he is fully aware of the colossal skeleton waiting inside, he decides to at least try talking to it. Thanks to his title's effect, there is a small chance it might respond peacefully, and if things go wrong, he can always run away. The moment he steps into the Nightmare Realm once more, he comes face to face with the giant skeleton. Face to face with the colossal skeleton, Shen Ye quickly introduces himself. Seeing no hostile reaction from the monster, our protagonist realizes this is the effect of the polite person title at work. However, when he asks the monster to be friends with him, the skeleton suddenly becomes furious and attacks. Our protagonist manages to dodge in the nick of time and jumps out of the realm as the door is destroyed by the monster in the process. Commenting on how close he came to being crushed, our protagonist concludes that, as expected, gray-colored titles are worthless. However, when he thinks about obtaining a new title, the system informs him that he can only receive one title per day. Nonetheless, Shen Ye decides to enter the realm again. Even if he cannot get another title today, that does not mean he will obtain one tomorrow, especially with the colossal skeleton standing in his way. Our protagonist adopts the calm and polite demeanor he had in his previous life on Earth. Unfortunately, the skeleton attacks him immediately. Our protagonist continues repeating this process, trying to negotiate with the monster while it repeatedly attempts to kill him. Eventually, the skeleton grows tired of the little game and, to Shen Ye's shock, decides to ignore him and leave. Just then, Shen Ye stops the skeleton by pointing out its broken limb and concludes that this must be the reason it wants to kill him. This finally gets through to the monster. Seizing the opportunity, our protagonist immediately offers 3 possible solutions to regenerate the lost limb using calcium supplements. However, he agrees to help only if the monster agrees to become friends with him. After saying all this, our protagonist anxiously waits for its response. However, no one expects the skeleton to suddenly attack him with magic instead. Our protagonist is already preparing to run away, but in the next second, he freezes. It turns out the monster is not attacking him at all. It is offering him a contract. After reading the contract, our protagonist learns the monster's identity: the progenitor of shadowed bones, devourer of corpses, and defeated lord of the underworld. Shen Ye is initially amazed by these grand titles, but he soon realizes the skeleton is actually a small fry, a low-ranking pencil pusher whose position is merely that of a 5th Division battlefield acquisition officer. Anyways, the skeleton lays out the terms of the agreement, which would normally benefit both parties. Since our protagonist is the first human it has ever made a contract with, it hopes Shen Ye understands what he is doing. Nonetheless, our protagonist signs the contract. He is impressed to find himself labeled as the one who overcame the curse of a fallen evil spirit and the gatekeeper of 2 realms. After signing the contract, our protagonist returns home. Shen Yu's parents take good care of their son, and Shen Yu feels a warmth in his heart. In his previous life, he was an orphan, so what he is feeling now is only natural. Just then, someone begins knocking on the door. The visitors turn out to be police officers who have come to investigate our protagonist's case. In the next chapter, Shen Ye listens carefully to the officer's explanation. From what he learns, incidents like the one that happened to him are not uncommon. Normally, the victims die, which is precisely why the authorities have come to understand how he managed to survive. However, both we and our protagonist already know the truth. The original Shen Ye died because of the ghost summoned by the cursed statue. In response, our protagonist tells the officers that he has no idea how he survived, and suggests that perhaps he was simply lucky. One of the officers becomes speechless upon hearing this explanation. Just then, his partner tells Shen Yu not to be upset. Apparently, the higher-ups are already taking action to ensure something like this never happens again. Judging from his insignia, our protagonist realizes the man is a sergeant. Shen Yu thanks him for the reassurance, but admits that he feels someone is targeting him. The officer finds this strange. After all, Shen Ye is only a middle school student who has yet to enter the academy and has a very limited social circle. Naturally, he cannot think of any reason why someone would want him dead. Still, the officers note that they need to leave to attend to other police matters. Watching them leave, our protagonist realizes several things. First, from their conversation, he can tell that the higher-ups and the government consider cases like this troublesome to deal with. Because of that, it is normal for people, even police officers, to keep their distance. Secondly, Shen Yu is just a middle school student with no real enemies. Why would someone use something as powerful as a cursed statue to assassinate him? Before our protagonist can think further, the same officer from earlier returns. After making sure they are alone, the man hands Shen Yu a card. He tells him that if anything happens, Shen Yu should make sure to contact him first. The card reveals the sergeant's name, Luo Faishuan. This causes Shen Yu to think that perhaps not everyone in the police force is a coward. The real question is whether the sergeant can actually help him. And if Luo Faishuan is helping him, that means he is acting against the wishes of the higher-ups. Besides, The main issue right now is survival. The person who tried to assassinate him will definitely come back now that he is still alive. Worse yet, they could potentially involve his parents. Thinking of this, Shen Yu wastes no time and immediately summons his gate. The only solution now is to become stronger as quickly as possible. With that, he enters the realm while wearing his trademark friendly salesman smile. The skeleton soon appears, and Shen Yu informs it that he has brought the calcium supplements. However, the skeleton points at something else. Shen Yu asks whether it wants the tonic instead. In response, the monster produces a green crystal. It turns out the skeleton wants to exchange the crystal for the tonic. As for the crystal itself, it is a low-tier material from the Nightmare Realm that originally belonged to the elf race. It is explained that the Nightmare Realm is constantly at war, and the nature elves developed this technique to fight against giant skeletons like the one standing before him. Our protagonist is surprised when he learns that the crystal functions like a hard drive, except it is used purely for storing martial arts techniques. The moment he accepts it, the system begins displaying information about the skill contained within. Just like that, he automatically learns the Moonlit Deer Walk. The skill is an agility-type movement technique focused on speed, mobility, and evasion. With this skill, our protagonist believes he can at least defend himself if another attack comes. Still, he hands over the supplements as agreed in their contract. After receiving them, the skeleton disappears, leaving Shen Yu wondering why it acts so secretive when the two already have a contract together. Regardless, our protagonist begins testing out his newly acquired skill. Unfortunately, he quickly discovers that the technique has a minimum requirement. To use it, he needs an agility stat of 3. However, the system shows that his current agility is only 2. Naturally, the skill fails to activate. Just as he begins wondering how he can increase his stats, a voice suddenly interrupts his thoughts. The figure that appears turns out to be the very assassin who wants him dead. And this time, the assassin coldly declares that he will make sure our protagonist never lives to see another day. Right before lunging at our protagonist, the assassin strikes, but Shen Yu manages to dodge the attack through sheer luck. Thinking it was a close call, Shen Yu breathes a sigh of relief, while the assassin notes that he is not completely helpless. Our protagonist immediately realizes that they have already sent another person after him. Using his title, Polite Person, he attempts to start a conversation with the assassin. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, leaving Shen Yu in disbelief. At that moment, the realm system explains that titles, like other things from the Nightmare Realm, are divided into ranks. The lowest rank is gray, while the highest and rarest rank is purple. Shen Yu's Polite Person title is only gray rank, making him realize that the title is basically trash. Just when our protagonist thinks it is all over, the realm system reveals that titles can actually be consumed and converted into points that can be used to boost his stats. Thankfully, that is exactly what he needs. Without wasting any time, Shen Yu consumes his title and gains 1 point, which he immediately invests into agility. As a result, he successfully activates Moonlit Deer Walk and vanishes behind the assassin. At the same time, he enters the gate. Furious, the assassin rushes after him. However, he quickly becomes puzzled and wonders if he has stepped into some kind of secret passage. Meanwhile, Shen Yu disappears from sight and silently wishes the man good luck. And just like that, the assassin is consumed by the colossal skeleton as a snack. This causes the damaged limbs of the skeleton to begin regenerating. Outside, Shen Yu seizes the opportunity to catch his breath. He knows that the people who want him dead will likely send even more assassins, so he needs a way to obtain a defensive skill. Just then, he receives a reward from the skeleton. The skeleton monster is pleased that our protagonist offered the assassin as a sacrifice, so it decides to reward him with 2 items. The first item is a green rank Pale Shadow Crown, crafted by the undead. It allows the wearer to disguise themselves as a member of the elf race. The second item is a war medal, a symbol of honor and good deeds among the elves of the Nightmare Realm. It allows the wearer to teleport directly to the elven territory. Seeing this, Shen Yu thinks the skeleton is truly something else and decides to test the crown first. The moment he puts it on, he immediately transforms into an elf. Our protagonist is genuinely amazed and concludes that he will definitely visit the elven territory the next day. Just then, he hears a knock on the door. At first, he assumes it must be another assassin. But when the person knocking reveals himself, it is Chen Haoyu. Shen Yu immediately removes his disguise and explains that Chen Haoyu is the original Shen Yu's best friend. The moment he opens the door, Chen Haoyu rushes in and hugs him tightly, sighing in relief while apologizing at the same time. At the same moment, Shen Yu's mother walks in, surprised to see his friend. Our protagonist quickly explains that it wasn't his fault, but simply his own misfortune. Soon after, they begin talking. Chen Haoyu is shocked to hear that Shen Yu's father went to obtain a super tonic, as that kind of item is extremely expensive and usually only available to rich and noble families. Because of this, Chen Haoyu insists that Shen Yu must give the academy entrance exam his all since his parents are sacrificing so much for him. That's when Shen Yu suddenly remembers. Original Shen Yu was supposed to take the first entrance exam before he was killed. This is also why Chen Haoyu keeps apologizing. He believes Shen Yu would have had a much better chance of entering a better academy, if not for what happened. Shen Yu's mother quickly tells him to stop blaming himself, saying her son only missed the first exam and will definitely do well in the second. This makes Shen Yu reflect. This world is completely different from Earth. Here, there are various systems and exams, for example. Martial arts examinations are divided into physical strength and agility tests. He considers taking the exam seriously, but he is still being targeted. Going to school is practically exposing himself to danger. His mother also notices that he looks shaken and frightened. To his surprise, she gently pulls him into an embrace and comforts him, telling him that she will support any decision he makes, even if he chooses not to take the exam, because his safety matters most. Feeling this warmth, Shen Yu regains confidence and declares that he will definitely take the exams. With that, Chen Haoyu leaves, hoping to see him at school the next day. From Shen Yu's memories, our protagonist discovers that he is actually the grandson of a respected noble family. However, his father's relationship with the family, and especially with his grandfather, is strained, so he and his parents live independently. This means the super tonic his father is going to obtain from his own father will not be easy to acquire. He can already imagine how much his parents must have begged just to secure even an ordinary tonic for him. This realization strengthens his resolve. He is now fully fired up for the exams, the next day at school. While other students chat casually, Shen Yu remains focused on his studies, thinking about how the school environment actually favors him and offers some protection from assassins. Just then, one of his classmates walks over and informs him that a girl is waiting for him in the hallway. Shen Yu goes to meet her. The girl, Zhao Yibing, is someone who used to constantly push the original Shen Yu to study. Zhao Yibing tells him she heard he plans to take the exams, and confidently adds that she did very well on the first exam, making her sure she will enter a provincial elite academy. Shen Yu simply smiles and congratulates her. Then she drops a bombshell. She suggests that they should stop seeing each other. Our protagonist is slightly surprised. She is clearly putting on an act, trying to make him chase after her and act desperate so she can feel in control of the situation. Shen Yu simply lets her continue talking. She even reveals that she has already deleted his contact. Shen Yu calmly fires back, pointing out that in all their years of so-called friendship, she was always the one initiating contact and pestering him. In other words, they were never truly friends to begin with, so she should stop bothering him. Zhao Yibing's cheeks turn red as she freezes mid-step. The hallway quickly erupts into gossip, with some students noting that Shen Yu is actually one of the top students, and that she is publicly cutting ties just because he missed the first exam. At that moment, one of Zhao Yibing's friends steps in, pointing at Shen Yu and accusing him of being shameless for treating her like this after everything she has done for him. Playing the victim, Zhao Yibing asks why he is doing this, reminding everyone that they were friends while she begins to sob. Shen Yu scratches his head in annoyance. First she tries to humiliate him, now she switches to guilt-tripping. Regardless, he calmly responds that accepting gifts between friends is normal kindness, not a binding contract. To him, refusing them would just be rude. Of course, the entire hallway seems to side with him. He walks away, telling Zhao Yibing that if she truly cared about him, she wouldn't try to kick him when he hasn't even fallen yet. Before leaving, he casually gave her the middle finger, signaling that she should stop pretending they were ever truly friends. Of course, Zhao Yibing's nameless friend is completely enraged by our protagonist's remarks. Just like her friend, the entire hall erupts, and everyone turns against our protagonist. However, he remains completely unbothered. Meanwhile, Zhao Yibing can only stand there, realizing that her plan to dump our protagonist first has completely backfired. Instead of humiliating him, she ends up being the one who gets dumped and embarrassed in front of everyone, despite having people support her. Suddenly, someone steps in front of Shen Yu. The guy demands to know who gave him permission to leave. Shen Yu stares at him for a moment before remembering that the idiot is one of his classmates and one of Zhao Yibing's biggest simps. Our protagonist casually reminds him that class is about to start. However, the big guy ignores him, pointing out that our protagonist has been absent for several days and is no longer the top student. He boldly claims that he is much stronger than Shen Yu and insists that he apologize to Zhao Yibing. Our protagonist feels hopeless. He explains that Zhao Yibing was the one who called him and that he has never bothered her. So, following the bully's instructions, our boy suddenly puts on a pitiful expression. He apologizes to Zhao Yibing and insists that she keeps pestering him, asking if she is happy now. Without waiting for her response, our boy runs away crying. Our protagonist is truly gaslighting Pro Max. Immediately whispers spread through the crowd. Zhao Yibing desperately tries to explain herself, but it's too late. In her mind, the big idiot has only made the situation worse. As a result, the big guy, Sun Ming, becomes furious and declares that he will teach our protagonist a lesson. But just before his fist can reach Shen Yu, our protagonist uses his moonlit deer walk, effortlessly dodging the attack and leaving Sun Ming and the entire hallway stunned. The hallway falls silent. Someone points out that our protagonist's movements were so smooth and fast that even Sun Ming failed to react. Our protagonist simply stands there, aura farming, and demands to know what the idiot's problem is since he has already apologized. At that moment, a senior appears and shouts at the students because the mock exams are about to begin. With that, everyone rushes toward the examination site, while Sun Ming glares at our protagonist as if to say that this isn't over. The next scene shifts to the school's track field. Our protagonist's best friend approaches him. He tells our protagonist that the test will take forever and suggests that they visit a new comic store to pass the time. Chen Haoyu's suggestion makes our protagonist remember something. He immediately fakes a stomachache and explains that he really needs to use the restroom. It turns out there is still some time before the exam, and our protagonist plans to use it to obtain a new title. Just like that, our protagonist walks through the hallway and enters the restroom. Immediately, a mysterious figure, most likely an assassin, appears and follows him inside. Moments later, however, the assassin is shocked because our protagonist is nowhere to be found. This is because Shen Yu has already changed his appearance and entered his gate, believing that this is the perfect opportunity to obtain a new title. While exploring, he discovers the gun that belonged to the previous assassin who was devoured. Our protagonist notices that the weapon is fully loaded. Although he has never used a gun in his life, he decides to keep it. Since the colossal skeleton is nowhere in sight and time is running out, our protagonist begins entering the nightmare realm. At that moment, the same mysterious figure speaks and hands Shen Yu an item that could help him before he is successfully teleported out of the space. In the next chapter, Shen Yu is successfully teleported to the Elven territory. As he examines the dagger in his hand, he realizes that it must be the item the mysterious voice gave him. Just then, a group of Elven troopers approaches him. Hearing them call him Fern, Shen Yu is initially puzzled. However, when the elves mention that he finally arrived and that they were considering calling off the mission because of his absence, Shen Yu quickly apologizes for being late. At the same time, he notices that they are all undead because every one of them is wearing the pale shadow crown. One of the soldiers explains their mission. Thanks to their disguises, they can easily gain the trust of the elves by posing as decorated soldiers. Once inside the territory, they plan to seize the opportunity to assassinate the chief of the elven village. This is the first time our protagonist has heard about any of this, and he immediately starts sweating. Even so, he forces himself to stay calm. Suddenly, one of the undead warns him not to touch the crown. Our protagonist quickly apologizes, claiming that he only wanted to adjust it because it felt uncomfortable. One of the soldiers immediately scolds him, calling him an idiot for even thinking about it. Shen Yu promises that he won't make the same mistake twice, while secretly concluding that Fern must be the name of the massive skeleton. In other words, these undead are his companions, and the colossal skeleton has thrown him into a mission he never agreed to. Our protagonist is horrified. As they continue running, Shen Yu is surprised to discover that, despite being undead, these soldiers are incredibly agile. Eventually, they arrive at the elven village. Our boy can't help but think that if he had to run any farther, he might have passed out. As the group goes over the plan one last time, our protagonist is suddenly assigned the task of killing the village chief. Naturally, he questions them. The entire group turns to look at him, wondering if he has a problem with the mission or if he plans to back out now. Putting on a false display of confidence, Shen Yu says that he has actually been looking forward to it. Meanwhile, he's sweating internally, knowing that even if he survives the mission, Fern's companions might kill him if he refuses. With no other choice, our protagonist approaches the village gate while thinking that this has become a complete suicide mission. After presenting the Silver War medallion, his identity is successfully verified. One of the guards then offers to escort him to meet the village chief. As they walk through the village, the residents greet him warmly, treating him like a respected hero. Even a few of the young women can't help but stare at him, making our protagonist briefly wonder if he should just forget the mission altogether. Eventually, they arrive at the chief's quarters, where the village chief is already waiting to receive him. Fern's comrades tell Shen Yu that they will handle things outside and wait for him. In other words, they'll probably disappear the moment anything goes wrong. Our protagonist sighs. The mission is incredibly difficult, but if he somehow manages to pull it off, he might earn an amazing title. With that thought in mind, Shen Yu steps inside and finally comes face to face with the village chief, who warmly welcomes him back from the front lines. At that exact moment, the realm system suddenly appears. It informs our protagonist that the analysis has been completed and that he can now see the titles of other beings. Shen Yu immediately looks at the village chief. And man, the old chief is absolutely stacked with several legendary purple titles. Meanwhile, our protagonist only recently had a gray title, the lowest rank possible. The sight alone is enough to make Shen Yu break out in a cold sweat, as he wonders how on earth he ended up in a situation like this. Still, if he somehow survives this disaster, he silently swears that he'll definitely settle the score with Fern. Before anything can happen, the village chief thanks Shen Yu for his service and insists that he rest before discussing anything important. With a wave of his hand, the chief uses teleportation magic on our protagonist. In an instant, Shen Yu finds himself at a grand banquet, seated right next to his supposed comrades. As our protagonist listens to their conversation, he realizes that they are openly discussing their plan to assassinate the village chief. It doesn't take long for him to figure it out. These guys are simply using him as the sacrificial lamb while they prepare their own escape route. Before he can think of a way out, a beautiful elf girl approaches him and asks if he would honor her with a dance. Seeing Shen Yu, she happily requests permission to dance with a hero from the front lines. Our protagonist immediately accepts but warns her in advance that he isn't a very good dancer. Nonetheless, she simply smiles and tells him to follow her lead. As they dance, Shen Yu can't help but think that it's a shame he's probably about to die. Otherwise, he would have enjoyed spending more time with such a beautiful girl. The elf quickly notices that he's unusually quiet and wonders if he's still haunted by the horrors of the battlefield. Shen Yu awkwardly explains that he's just focused on not stepping on her feet and that she's overthinking things. Lainey's eyes light up with excitement like a child seeing candy for the first time. Before they part, she hands Shen Yu a bracelet and admits that he wasn't such a bad dancer after all. However, she jokingly warns him that if his magic trick is disappointing, she'll be taking the bracelet back. Our protagonist confidently agrees before climbing onto one of the banquet tables. After getting everyone's attention, Shen Yu announces that he is about to perform a magic trick. He boldly declares that he is going to transform into a human. Among everyone present, Lainey is by far the most excited. Of course, a few elves express their doubts, wondering if such a thing is even possible. Without another word, our protagonist removes the pale shadow crown. As the disguise fades away, he casually tosses the crown toward Lainey as a gift. The entire banquet hall erupts in amazement as Shen Yu's true human appearance is revealed. Even Lainey claps excitedly and asks him to turn back into an elf. However, our protagonist doesn't answer her request. Instead, he calmly explains that he only transformed because he removed the crown. Then, to everyone's shock, he points toward the 3 undead soldiers. Shen Yu reveals that they are actually undead and claims that everyone will see their true forms if they remove their crowns as well. The moment the word undead is spoken, the cheerful atmosphere of the banquet instantly turns hostile. Realizing that chaos is about to break out, our protagonist decides that this is his cue to leave. After all, he still has mock exams to worry about. He waves goodbye to Lainey and hopes that they'll meet again someday. The poor girl can only stare at him in complete shock as he vanishes. As for the 3 undead soldiers disguised as elves, thick vines suddenly burst from the ground and bind them in place. The one responsible is the village chief himself. He remarks on the irony of the situation, pointing out that the undead attempted to infiltrate the elven village without realizing that a human had already infiltrated their own ranks. Sweating nervously, one of the undead hurriedly claims that this must all be a misunderstanding. The chief completely ignores the excuse. He removes one of their crowns, instantly revealing the undead's true appearance. Looking at the artifact, the village chief comments on the strange magic contained within it. He realizes that the undead have been using these crowns to sneak into elven settlements, and that they finally have a reliable way to identify future spies. The chief then sincerely thanks our protagonist for exposing the infiltrators and says that the elves will one day repay this great debt. However, something tells Lainey that Shen Yu will never come back. On the side between dimensions, our protagonist can't help but complain about how close that was. The moment Shen Yu spots the skeleton, he immediately becomes furious. Venting his frustration, he comments on how skeleton Fern almost got him killed while it was busy enjoying its meal. Our protagonist becomes even more furious when the skeleton casually turns toward him and notes that he is still alive. Only now does Shen Yu realize that it can actually speak. He nearly swears as he complains about how the skeleton almost got him killed. Ignoring our boy's tantrum, Fern demands information, but our protagonist refuses. However, Fern reminds him of their contract and offers to pay in exchange for the information. Of course, this makes Shen Yu extremely furious, thinking Fern could simply shut him up with some trinket. Nonetheless, Fern explains that the reason he gave our protagonist his crown and made him take the mission was because he was confident Shen Yu wouldn't die. After all, humans and elves are allies. As a token of apology, he hands over a legacy nightmare crystal. This crystal contains 3 top-tier evolutionary necromantic innate abilities. Fern explains that innate abilities are inherent powers that our protagonist can use without expending mana. In addition, this crystal is extremely precious to undead beings. After learning that the reason Fern is still alive is because he possessed the crystal, our protagonist decides to accept it and let him off this time, adding that he is a man of principle. The moment he makes contact with the crystal, our protagonist is transported into a mysterious dimension. There, a colossal undead king presents him with 3 choices, stating that he can only choose one ability to make his innate power. The realm system explains the abilities one by one. The first is Murmur of the Dark, an evolvable ability that summons the soul of the deceased to answer our protagonist's call, so that it may find peace. The second is Sacred Bone Body, another evolvable skill. This ability grants our protagonist immunity to death for 5 seconds, with a cooldown of 24 hours. Finally, the last ability is Necromantic Resurrection. As the name suggests, it allows the user to raise an undead creature using a soul fire. Our protagonist carefully considers the 3 abilities. The second and third are useless to him, so in the end he chooses the first one, not because it is powerful, but because it will be useful for gathering information later. Just like that, the crystal begins to merge with his soul. After reappearing in the cross-dimensional space, our protagonist immediately notices the effects of the ability. Meanwhile, Fern is surprised that he picked Murmur of the Dark. He explains that it isn't a bad skill, but it doesn't directly increase combat power. Not to mention, our protagonist is the first necromancer to choose this ability. Regardless, Fern insists that Shen Yu recount everything that happened during his mission. After listening to the explanation, Fern notes that the elven girl is actually the priestess who was his main target. As for the chief, the man is actually the most powerful elven priest. Thinking about it, our protagonist realizes that it makes sense. No wonder the elf possessed so many titles. As for Fern, he suddenly realizes that the undead soldiers who accompanied our protagonist on the mission are dead. Shen Yu becomes confused as Fern suddenly bolts off, shouting that this was his chance. Deciding they can chat later, Shen Yu chooses to leave and attend to his own matters. The moment he steps out of the cross-dimensional realm and returns to his main world, the realm system notifies him that he has received a green title called One of Us. The title's effect causes enemies to regard him as an ally for 10 seconds. Since it is only a green title, the active effect can be used just once per day. In addition, the bracelet our protagonist received from Lainey, the Nature's Blessing bracelet, will gradually increase his magic energy over time. Seeing all of this, our protagonist can't help but think that today's outcome wasn't entirely bad after all. The next chapter begins with the mock agility test, and it's our protagonist's best friend's turn. The moment the boy gets the green light, he dashes forward while dodging the purple paint being sprayed at him. Seeing this, our protagonist watches from the crowd and begins encouraging him. As a result, his friend gets distracted. Because of that, a blob of paint splashes directly onto his face, causing some of the students to mock him for acting cocky. Soon, it's our protagonist's turn. As he approaches, The teacher gives Chen Hoyu a score of 70, noting that he is lucky this is only a mock test and not the actual entrance exam. Anyways, our protagonist takes his position. The instructor gives the green light, and our protagonist dashes forward at incredible speed while effortlessly dodging every stream of paint aimed at him. Of course, this display shocks many people. Our protagonist expected as much. With his mastery of the elven moonlit walk, this test is nothing more than a breeze. Unbeknownst to him, someone is paying close attention to his performance. The man wearing glasses notes that the boy is impressive, to which the principal agrees, adding that our protagonist is actually the top student in his class. Unfortunately, he missed the first entrance exam. Hearing this, the man in glasses admits that Shen Yu's agility is outstanding, but states that if he can achieve a perfect score in the psychic test, he will personally give him a second chance to take the first exam. This shocks the principal because a perfect score might be asking too much. After all, he knows that our protagonist is merely average in that area. Nonetheless, the man refuses to change his stance. Meanwhile, the teacher in charge of the mock exams announces that our protagonist achieved a perfect score. He even feels a little bad that the boy missed the first test. Shen Yu insists that the teacher shouldn't worry because he is confident he will get into the academy. This surprises Chen Hao-yu, who immediately suggests they celebrate. Our protagonist agrees and proposes doing it after school. He then tells his friend to clean himself up while he takes care of something in class. Later, inside the classroom, our protagonist feels exhausted. Apparently, he has been studying the knowledge of this world. While subjects such as mathematics, physics, and chemistry remain largely the same, history and many other subjects are completely different. That is why he feels mentally drained. However, at that moment, one of his classmates violently kicks his desk. Our protagonist quickly dodges. It turns out to be the same idiot from the hallway. Shen Yu simply ignores the fool and asks if Zhao Yibing sent him. Of course, the bully denies it while snapping his fingers. Just like that, the rest of his group appears. The bully proudly brags that his strength has recently increased by 2 points. In response, our protagonist simply activates his new title. Immediately, the entire group looks as though they have been hypnotized. As a result, Shen Yu learns that Zhao Yibing really was behind everything after all. Oddly enough, this makes him feel relieved. At the very least, it means they aren't trying to kill him despite the target currently hanging over his head. Unfortunately, after 10 seconds, the title's effect ends. Shen Yu instantly labels the title as useless, since it can only be activated once per day and lasts for merely 10 seconds. Naturally, he tells the realm system to devour the title. To his surprise, the system informs him that he can reallocate points that have already been assigned. Because of this, he removes points from agility and combines them with the points gained from devouring his title. As a result, his strength skyrockets from 1.2 to 5.2. At that very moment, one of the bullies restrains him. Confident in his own 2 points of strength, the bully believes he can at least leave our protagonist with a few broken ribs. However, the moment he throws a punch at Shen Yu's chest, everything changes. Our protagonist feels absolutely nothing. In contrast, the bully freezes on the spot as though his brain is struggling to process what just happened. Then, a second later, he lets out a blood-curdling scream. His fist had been shattered by the punch. Before we proceed, some context about strength is explained. An average untrained adult has a strength value of 1 point, and strength isn't based solely on raw power or muscle mass. Instead, it is a combination of several factors: muscles, bones, flexibility in the meridians, and even a person's aura. To put it simply, it is essentially a measure of one's life force. Anyways, with that out of the way, our protagonist approaches the bully, noting how the fool is willing to throw away his life and future out of jealousy. Shen Yu reminds the bully that he had earlier talked about breaking a few ribs in order to send him to the hospital. Now, seeing the same bully trembling in fear and even begging for mercy, our protagonist recounts all of his foolish actions, the attempts to humiliate him, ruin his future, and make his life miserable. He then punches the fool, remarking that the guy must be incredibly naive if he thinks he is going to let them off so easily. Soon, sounds of pain and desperate cries for help echo from outside the school building. Later, the homeroom teacher enters the classroom, only to freeze at the sight before him. Our protagonist is truly something else. Even after beating the bullies, he somehow manages to play the victim. Knowing the truth, both the teacher and the students are left stunned by the dramatic performance unfolding before them. Meanwhile, Zhao Yibing stands among the crowd with a shocked expression. She realizes she has seriously miscalculated. She can't believe that the bullies she arranged were no match for our protagonist. Staring at the last message she received from the bully, she wonders if this means everything is over between her and Shen Yu. As if hearing her thoughts, one of her friends asks whether she regrets ending things with him. Only now does Zhao Yibing realize her mistake. If she had encouraged our protagonist back in the hallway and remained on his side after seeing how strong he was, things might have turned out very differently. Unfortunately, there is nothing she can do about it now. In her mind, Shen Yu has just caused a massive scene. That means his chances of getting into the academy will most likely be revoked. In other words, her goal of ruining his future has been accomplished. The only thing she regrets is not cutting ties with him sooner. At that moment, her friend pulls her from her thoughts and gestures toward the bully. The instant their eyes meet, the atmosphere seems to freeze. Zhao Yibing panics as she notices the fool staring directly at her. She desperately hopes he doesn't drag her down with him. To her shock, the swollen-faced bully suddenly calls out her name. Immediately, the entire hallway turns to look at her. Fortunately for Zhao Yibing, it becomes the perfect opportunity to act. The entire hallway watches as she suddenly runs off, calling our protagonist an animal while dialing the police. The homeroom teacher can't believe what he is witnessing. Meanwhile, our protagonist can't help but think that the girl is actually quite smart. By doing this, she has successfully distanced herself from whatever consequences are about to fall upon the bully and his group. Anyways, the homeroom teacher quickly dismisses the crowd before telling our protagonist to follow him to the office. On the other side, the principal walks alongside the man in glasses. Apparently, the man hasn't found any students who meet the standards of his organization, even though the principal does his best to persuade him otherwise. Just then, their conversation is interrupted when a teacher informs the principal about our protagonist's fight and how the police have become involved. The man initially wants to dismiss the matter, however, the teacher immediately shows them her phone. Apparently, the entire fight was recorded. At first, neither man takes it too seriously. However, it doesn't take long before both of them are left shocked by what they see. The police officers watching the footage wear similar expressions. Apparently, our protagonist secretly turned on his camera before the fight began. One of the officers is stunned when our protagonist explains that he only recorded the encounter because he was afraid the guys might beat him up. However, judging from the footage, it looks like our protagonist did the exact opposite. Because of this, the officer insists that Shen Yu follow them to the station. Our protagonist's homeroom teacher immediately argues back, pointing out that his student has already missed the first entrance exam. Now this incident has happened as well. He questions whether the officers really need to continue investigating when the evidence is already right in front of them. While the argument continues, our protagonist decides to use the opportunity to reallocate points among his abilities. Just then, the principal finally enters alongside his friend. Both men compliment our protagonist for recording the fight, noting that without the footage, he could have easily been expelled. The man in glasses, Sir Qian, also points out that our protagonist is far stronger than the bullies and believes Shen Yu knew the fight was ultimately pointless. He says this because he can clearly tell from the footage that our protagonist was holding back the entire time. Shen Yu simply agrees. Sir Qian then comments on his impressive strength and agility, concluding that he is qualified to join his organization. Speaking of the organization, our protagonist finally realizes that the man is actually the director of the Human Martial Arts Association. The director explains that the association possesses vast martial arts knowledge, valuable intellectual property, and countless martial arts techniques. For an ordinary person, receiving an invitation to join the organization is practically the same as ascending to an entirely different level of society. Not to mention, Director Qian's aura is completely different. Shen Yu can't help but think that even if he continuously reallocates his points, he still wouldn't be able to match a powerhouse like him. Just then, Director Qian notes that the cybernetics system estimates Shen Yu's strength at 4.5 points before asking for the actual number. Our protagonist calmly replies that it is 5. This world possesses a powerful AI capable of accurately assessing a person's capabilities. This technology is known as the cybernetics system. Of course, everyone present is left stunned when he casually reveals a strength value of 5. Director Qian comments that the result is impressive. Meanwhile, our protagonist wears a clueless expression, genuinely wondering if the number is really that remarkable. The director then explains that for a student, a strength value of 4.5 is already exceptional. With a value of 5, however, Shen Yu can operate certain combat mechs, and even wield powerful ancient weapons that most people cannot handle. Combined with his perfect agility score, the achievement becomes even more impressive. Our protagonist is shocked when director Kian decides to personally reevaluate his strength. The reason is simple: the Martial Arts Association needs to be 100% certain about his capabilities. As a result, Shen Yu immediately thanks the director and agrees to join the organization. Satisfied with the answer, director Kian prepares to leave, planning to conduct the reevaluation at a later date. However, he suddenly pauses. Out of curiosity, director Qian asks about Shen Yu's psychic power. Our protagonist knows he can't appear too outstanding, so he casually answers that his psychic power is 3, assuming that should at least be average. However, judging from director Kian's expression, that clearly isn't the case. The entire room falls silent. Everyone is left shocked because a psychic power value of 3 is nowhere near average in this world. The atmosphere instantly changes. Director Kian then suggests that Shen Yu demonstrate his psychic abilities by moving an object with his mind. Without hesitation, our protagonist secretly reallocates some points. Moments later, he effortlessly lifts a chair into the air using nothing but his thoughts. Seeing this, even the police officers are left speechless. The shock deepens when their captain suddenly decides to leave. Naturally, the officers ask for an explanation. The captain simply looks at them and asks whether they are blind. With talent like Shen Yu's, it is obvious that he is destined for great things. More importantly, the director of the Martial Arts Association has already taken a personal interest in him. That alone is enough reason not to get involved. Predictably, the director becomes very excited, because he has just struck gold, and even begins singing. Among everyone present, our protagonist is the only one who feels awkward. Eventually, the principal decides to leave with the homeroom teacher to give Director Kian and our protagonist some space. Director Kian suddenly asks our protagonist about his goals in life. Trying to flatter the director, our protagonist says that he wants to be like him, making the man laugh. However, Director Qian insists that he tell him the truth. So our protagonist seriously tells him that he wants to grow stronger and become powerful enough to protect his family. Director Qian nods approvingly and says that today will be the day he takes his first step toward that goal before asking our protagonist to attack him. When our protagonist calls him a creepy old man, the director explains that he does not mean verbal attacks or insults. Because of this, our protagonist anxiously allocates his points to strength while asking for forgiveness in advance. The moment our protagonist makes his move, he is immediately restrained and becomes unable to move. While reaching for something, Director Qian explains that it is a martial arts technique that immobilizes opponents. The moment he asks our protagonist if he likes it, our protagonist immediately says that he wants to learn it. Pulling out a revolver, Director Qian tells our protagonist to watch closely. Our protagonist is shocked when the man shoots himself. But to his surprise, the bullet is stopped by an invisible barrier. The director explains that it is also a martial arts technique and adds that not even a sniper rifle can harm him. Anyways, the man says that there are many more techniques where that came from. When our protagonist expresses his desire to learn them, Director Qian uses the opportunity to tell him about the Hidden Dragon Project. The project was created by the association to train hidden talents like our protagonist. This training involves recommending candidates to the 3 best academies in the world. He tells our protagonist that these are not ordinary academies. Not only are their standards and entrance examinations extremely high and difficult, making it nearly impossible for ordinary people like him to gain admission, but they are also practically reserved for noble families. Seeing his confusion, Director Qian explains that noble families are ancient bloodlines. They possess not only treasures and martial arts techniques, but also control vast amounts of wealth and large populations. After getting the full picture, our protagonist realizes that the original Shen Yu comes from a noble family. Anyways, since there is a huge difference between commoners and nobles, the association created the Hidden Dragon Project to help commoners like him gain access to these elite academies. Director Qian also admits that the association is doing this for its own benefit, hoping to recruit these talented individuals in the future instead of letting them join other organizations. After listening to the director's explanation, our protagonist begins to realize that in this world, strength is what truly matters. His father, despite coming from one of these noble families, was exiled from his clan. As a result, the police did not bother helping with his assassination case. Not to mention the tonic he received from his parents, based on what Director Qian has said, it is probably nothing to his grandfather. yet his parents still had to kneel and beg for it. Furthermore, our protagonist points out that the police immediately dropped their investigation the moment he displayed his strength and earned Director Qian's approval. Since this world can only be dominated by the strong, our protagonist decides that he must become even stronger. Our protagonist signs the contract, and Director Qian officially welcomes him into the association. However, since our protagonist is still a minor, he needs his parents' signatures as well. The moment our protagonist casually mentions that his parents should be at home, Director Qian decides to leave immediately because he does not want another organization to beat him to the punch, and just like that, the man bolts away as if he is rushing out to buy milk. Our protagonist is left completely shocked as the man literally disappears before his eyes. Anyways, after hearing everything that happened with Director Qian, the principal and the homeroom teacher are overjoyed, already imagining how this story will make headlines. Just then, our protagonist notices his phone ringing and answers it while wondering about the unfamiliar number. The moment he picks up, he freezes. The caller turns out to be Officer Luo Faishuan, who informs him that he has discovered something regarding the incident. Later, at the police station, the scene shifts to Officer Luo Faishuan's office. In Shen Yu's mind, he cannot help but wonder why he keeps feeling that something is strange the moment he enters the station. Just then, Officer Luo Faishuan shows him a photograph. It was taken by accident on the day of our protagonist's incident. When he asks whether our protagonist recognizes the person in the image, Shen Yu honestly tells him that he has no clue. This is when Officer Luo Faishuan reveals that, based on their investigation, he has concluded that the man was trying to activate something. Our protagonist immediately begins sweating when the officer asks whether he was carrying anything unusual that day. From this, our protagonist can tell that the person in question was the one who activated the Wicked Ghost King statue. From what Officer Luo Faishuan is saying, it is clear that they have not caught the man yet. Furthermore, the statue has already disintegrated, meaning any reasonable trail has gone cold. Not to mention that he is the only person who survived the curse of the statue. Because of this, our protagonist has no choice but to lie. Officer Luo Faishuan finds this odd and asks whether he experienced anything unusual, such as choking or losing consciousness. On the surface, our protagonist denies everything, but he realizes from the way the officer speaks that he clearly knows something. Not to mention that ever since he entered Luo Faishuan's office, the strange feeling has only continued to intensify. Because of this, our protagonist suddenly claims that he remembers something just as Officer Luo Faishuan reaches for an object nearby. The officer does not believe him and asks whether he is sure. Our protagonist explains that he is not 100% certain, but insists on checking his bag first. Feeling increasingly uneasy, our protagonist allocates all of his remaining points to agility. If anything is about to happen, he is more than ready to bolt. At this point, he begins to regret not testing whether he could enter the cross-dimensional space beneath his feet. Suddenly, our protagonist jolts when the phone rings. Quickly recovering, he asks Officer Luo Faishuan whether he would like him to step outside and take the call, all while thinking about how frightened he was just moments ago and how close he came to opening the gate. In response, Officer Luo Faishuan tells him that there is no need. However, the officer suddenly freezes when he hears the caller tell him that it is time for him to die. Both of them are shocked when they see something emitting from the officer's chest. At that moment, our protagonist realizes that it is the same assassin who targeted him, and now he has come for Officer Luo Faishuan as well. However, Luo Faishuan does not seem affected in the slightest, making our protagonist remember the defensive technique that Director Qian demonstrated back at school. To our protagonist's shock, the officer immediately senses that the attacker is outside and jumps straight through the window. At the same time, the alarm system activates, announcing that there is an intruder, and that all non-combat personnel should seek shelter immediately. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still trying to understand what he is seeing, because it obviously looks as though he is no longer inside the city. Shen Yu observes the situation and notes that the man is not the assassin from the footage. Still, the stranger has come after Officer Luo Faishuan to avenge the church members he killed. Luo Faishuan, on the other hand, does not seem to have time to deal with the strange man as other police officers arrive as backup. Even so, the intruder decides to kill him, noting that it would be the best explanation he could give the others. But in the very next second, everything suddenly returns to normal, leaving our protagonist completely confused. Now, with Officer Luo Faishuan trapped in that strange place, our protagonist feels the familiar sensation intensify. His necromancy skill, Murmur of the Dark, automatically activates the moment he speaks his thoughts aloud. As we already know, the skill forces a soul to comply with our protagonist's demands, otherwise it will never find rest. This causes our protagonist to wonder whether there is actually a corpse somewhere inside Officer Luo Faishuan's office. Just then, he hears someone thanking him. Turning toward the source of the voice, our protagonist demands to know who spoke. He quickly realizes that the voice is coming from inside a locker. At the same time, he finds the voice strangely familiar. Now he can only hope that it is not the person he is thinking of. Unfortunately, the speaker turns out to be the real officer Luo Faishuan. Seeing this, our protagonist asks how such a thing is possible. Officer Luo Faishuan explains that he was killed by the assassin from the footage. It turns out that he was ambushed, and at the critical moment his weapon malfunctioned. That was how he died, and afterward, the assassin began impersonating him. Because of this, Shen Yu realizes that the fake Luo Faishuan only summoned him to the station to find out how he survived the cursed statue. Still, he asks the officer about the intruder, who claimed to be a member of some church, and the strange power he used. After listening to our protagonist's explanation, Officer Luo Faishuan tells him that what he witnessed moments ago was an anomaly. According to him, an anomaly is a phenomenon in which another world or dimension becomes connected to their own. However, it is still nowhere near as dangerous as a true calamity. When our protagonist asks what a calamity is, Luo Faishuan explains that it occurs when a powerful monster from another world appears in their world, making it far more dangerous than a simple anomaly. For example, he mentions the city of Zhangchan, which our protagonist has heard about before. Officially, it was described as an unprecedented earthquake. However, Officer Luo Faishuan reveals that this is simply what the government wanted the public to believe. In reality, the event was a textbook example of a calamity, and more than 13 million people died because of it. Anyways, he tells our protagonist that they do not have much time because the current anomaly is essentially a minor calamity with a limited duration. This makes our protagonist realize that he is still in grave danger. Because of this, Officer Luo Faishuan immediately instructs him to head to the 3rd floor, where he will find a silver wall panel. He then gives our protagonist a password. He tells him to write the password on the panel. Once he does so, he will receive protection. After obtaining all the information he needs, the system informs our protagonist that Luo Faishuan's soul has finally departed. Seeing this, our protagonist reflects on everything that has happened. It turns out this is the real reason why no police officer seemed interested in Shen Yu's case from the very beginning. He silently promises to seek justice for Officer Luo Faishuan. In addition, Luo Faishuan's explanation about his weapon malfunctioning at a critical moment can only mean one thing: the assassin has accomplices inside the police station. That means he cannot trust anyone there. Our protagonist acknowledges his current limitations, yet he still swears that one day he will avenge Officer Luo Faishuan, no matter what. However, in that very moment, his thoughts of revenge are interrupted as several police officers arrive to check on him. After receiving no response, the officers naturally let themselves into the office. Captain Wang enters first, calling out to our protagonist and insisting that he come out. Since there has been an attack, it is only natural for everyone present to be scanned by the cybernetic central system. Seeing no response, he orders the rest of his men to head downstairs, while he continues trying to contact both our protagonist and Officer Luo Faishuan. Still attempting to reassure our protagonist, Captain Wang observes the surroundings and instantly realizes that something is wrong. Apparently, he notices that Luo Faishuan's corpse has been moved, causing him to wonder whether our protagonist was responsible. As a result, he moves in a flash and begins searching the entire office for him. Even after a thorough search, he finds nothing. This immediately reminds him of his colleague, the very first assassin our protagonist encountered, who once mocked them for using such pathetic methods just to kill a minor. Feeling slightly irritated, the captain informs everyone over the radio that he suspects our protagonist's involvement in the recent anomaly and Officer Luo Faishuan's incident. He orders the officers to keep an eye out for him. The moment the coast is clear and the officers leave to be scanned by the AI system, our protagonist immediately steps out of his gate. Just as he suspected, the assassin had accomplices within the station. Knowing that the officers are currently occupied, our protagonist sees this as his chance to act. That means he needs to reach the 3rd floor and report everything. Arriving on the 3rd floor through a window, he finds the area completely deserted. Now all he has to do is write down the password Officer Luo Faishuan gave him. But at that exact moment, our protagonist suddenly freezes after being caught in the act. Even worse, the person who catches him is Captain Wang, or rather the assassin's accomplice. The captain immediately asks what he is doing. Our protagonist hurriedly comes up with an excuse while continuing to write the password, inwardly complaining about why it has to be so long. The password, it turns out, is actually an emergency activation code connected directly to the world government headquarters. Naturally, Captain Wang is shocked and wonders how our protagonist knows about something so highly classified. As a result, he immediately attacks, knowing exactly what will happen if the password is completed. But at that very instant, our protagonist summons his gate, Captain Wang charges forward and expresses surprise that our protagonist possesses an innate ability. Meanwhile, our protagonist silently thanks his luck, realizing that the gate can adapt to its surroundings. Captain Wang then launches a powerful kick toward the gate to our protagonist. Shen Yu immediately responds by unsummoning the gate. Now completely unable to stop himself, Captain Wang surges forward. The captain grows even more furious and swears to kill him, only for our protagonist to instantly resummon the gate. Captain Wang slams headfirst into the door. Now bleeding and absolutely furious, he cannot understand how the door suddenly reappeared or why it feels even sturdier than before. At the same time, our protagonist finally succeeds in writing down the password. After writing down the code, Kunlun, the world government's top AI, initiates an emergency assessment. In the process, it discovers Officer Luo Faishuan's corpse and immediately labels Captain Wang as an imposter. At once, the highest-ranking and closest martial arts practitioner is dispatched, and that person happens to be Director Qian himself. Unfortunately, the AI estimates that it will take him 30 seconds to arrive, causing Officer Wang to tell our protagonist that it is more than enough time for him to kill him. Because of this, our protagonist immediately tries to escape using his door ability. Unfortunately, he isn't fast enough. Just as it seems everything is over for him, Director Qian suddenly appears and obliterates the assassin with a single punch. Naturally, our protagonist is shocked to see him. Even more shocking, the AI actually laughs and mocks the dead assassin, asking if he really thought it would take a martial arts expert of Director Qian's caliber 30 seconds to arrive. Meanwhile, our boy can't help but find the dramatic entrance incredibly cool. Later, at the National Security Bureau, inside the office, Director Qian naturally asks how our protagonist came across the password. In response, he explains that Officer Luo Faishuan gave it to him while he was being hunted. Hearing this, Director Qian notes that Officer Luo was extremely cautious because he was being hunted by both the Silent Church and the assassin. After explaining that the Silent Church is a group of psychos responsible for creating the anomaly at the station, our protagonist feels bad that Officer Luo had to die. The director agrees while lighting his cancer stick, remarking that the man had a strong sense of justice and wasn't the kind of officer one encounters every day. Then he drops a bombshell. Apparently, the government AI has discovered the identity of the fake Luo Faishuan. The man belongs to an assassin organization known as the League Assassins, a group that accepts contracts online. Hearing this, our protagonist thinks that anyone capable of placing such a contract must be incredibly wealthy. Director Qian agrees, but wonders what our protagonist could possibly have done to make someone of that status want him dead. Since they are still investigating the matter, Shen Yu notes that Kunlun is extremely powerful. Naturally, he wonders why Officer Luo Faishuan didn't use it to call for backup when he encountered the assassin. Hearing this, Director Qian explains once again that Kunlun is the world government's central AI. Of course, it was thanks to Kunlun that he was able to save our boy. Normally, however, it doesn't involve itself in minor matters. As for why Officer Luo Faishuan didn't use it, a staff member enters the room and finishes the director's statement. She explains that Officer Luo Faishuan's main weapon was an exosuit. However, they have only now discovered that a virus had been implanted within it. This is the reason why his weapon failed when he faced the assassin. Once Officer Luo Faishuan died, the exosuit began functioning again, meaning that someone close to him had deliberately tampered with it. Only now does our protagonist realize the truth. No wonder Officer Luo Faishuan told him that his weapon had malfunctioned. In the end, there was nothing he could do when the assassin came for him. Seeing the expression on our protagonist's face, Director Qian tells him that he is now part of the Martial Arts Association and should remember one important lesson. He must never let his guard down around people with bad intentions. Hearing this, our protagonist promises to remember it. With that, Director Chian tells him that he should head home to his parents. However, our boy asks about the assassin inside the anomaly. Our protagonist is surprised when Director Kian says that someone else will handle it. Considering the man's strength, our protagonist thinks it should be no issue for him. That is, until the director explains just how troublesome anomalies can be. He recalls an incident involving a man who emerged from another dimension carrying a virus. It was only after the virus wiped out half the city that they finally discovered a way to kill it. But at that very moment, Director Chian suddenly froze. Apparently, it was just his phone ringing. Answering it, he discovered it was someone closely related to Officer Luo Faishuan. The moment he confirms the person's name, our protagonist is stunned to see the man begin sweating. Now, our protagonist can only wonder who Xiao Mengyu is and what kind of relationship she has with Officer Luo Faishuan. Before the next scene unfolds, Director Qian explains the contract details to Shen Yu and then excuses himself, giving Shen Yu's parents some privacy to speak with their son. The moment the director steps out, Shen Yu's father doesn't waste any time. He reveals his true identity. He is actually a descendant of a prestigious and ancient noble family. As expected, Shen Yu has long suspected something like this. He calmly mentions the Sanjin Shen clan. His mother has just referenced one of the few truly powerful ancient noble families that still exist. His mother then opens up about how she met his father. Once a genius and rising star of the clan, his father suffered from a rare condition that left him physically weak. To the family, he had become little more than a tool for a political marriage. When he defied them and chose to be with Shen Yu's mother, the couple was immediately cast out by the Shen clan. Noticing the look on his son's face, Shen Yu's father explains why he is sharing all of this now. He has decided to swallow his pride and return to the family to beg on Shen Yu's behalf, because their son is clearly talented. If Shen Yu rejoins the clan, he will gain access to their vast collection of prestigious martial arts techniques. However, if he chooses to join the Human Martial Arts Association instead, he will lose that opportunity forever. Shen Yu falls silent as his parents gently encourage him to make the right choice, promising their full support no matter what he decides. They are visibly taken aback when their son declares that he wants to join the Martial Arts Association. His mother asks if he is truly sure. Shen Yu reassures them with calm confidence. He can succeed without his grandfather's help. After all, if his father could forge his own path despite everything, then so can he. His resolute words deeply move both parents. With his decision made, Shen Yu prepares to meet Director Qian again. In his mind, he recalls the cold treatment the original Shen Yu received from the Shen clan. They were barely invited to family gatherings, and when they were treated like outcasts. Even his grandfather never bothered to meet his grandson. The only pleasant memories from those events were the times he played with the other noble children. In summary, Shen Yu wants nothing to do with the Sanjin Shen clan. He has officially chosen to join the Human Martial Arts Association. Meanwhile, Zhao Yibing has been busy the entire time. The girl is frantically trying to sabotage Shen Yu online, spreading exaggerated stories about the school incident in an attempt to ruin his reputation. She isn't just doing it to protect her own image. She wants to make Shen Yu regret humiliating her and ensure he becomes a complete loser. However, in the next second, a notification snaps her back to reality. When she opens it, she is shocked to see that every single one of her posts has been taken down and her account has been flagged. She can hardly believe what is happening. On the other side, Shen Yu is being celebrated publicly for successfully joining the Martial Arts Association and for his potential admission into one of the top academies. Seeing the surging praise and official news, Zhao Yibing completely collapses, wondering how any of this is even possible. Later, at the Human Martial Arts Association headquarters, Shen Yu and Director Qian are riding the elevator to the top floor when the director sighs, mentioning that he has only received 5 merit points for the earlier commotion at the police station. Hearing this, Shen Yu naturally asks what merit points are. Director Qian explains that they function as a special currency within the association, used to purchase items, weapons, and even valuable intelligence. Unfortunately, since Shen Yu is still a minor with no official job, he won't be receiving any for now. But right then, his phone buzzes with a message. Due to his contribution to the recent case, although he didn't receive standard merit points, he has been awarded a special reward directly from the World Government Merit Department. Upon arriving at the top floor, Director Qian shifts the conversation to martial arts training. He explains that schools only teach the basics, while the real advanced techniques are reserved for the academies. Shen Yu expresses his desire to learn some offensive skills for self-protection. The director agrees it is a good idea and promises to also look into the recent assassination attempts against him. Just then, a staff member reports to the director about handling the online rumors concerning Shen Yu. Seeing the boy's confusion, Director Qian explains that as an official member of the Martial Arts Association, Shen Yu will now enjoy several benefits, one of which is a monthly allowance. The moment Shen Yu steps into his assigned private room, he is greeted by a personalized welcome message from Xu Mulin. He sits quietly and listens as the idol encourages him to work hard, even motivating him further by offering VIP tickets to her next concert. This woman turns out to be the original Shen Yu's favorite idol. Moreover, the entire room has been meticulously designed and customized according to the original Shen Yu's preferences. For a mere new recruit, the Martial Arts Association spares no expense. His room is also located on the highest floor. All this special treatment is clearly because of his demonstrated strength and potential. Inspired by the gesture, Shen Yu resolves to become even stronger. He decides to enter the realm at midnight to earn a better title in preparation for the Academy entrance exam in 2 days. The moment midnight strikes, our protagonist immediately summons his realm gate. However, what he sees next is completely unexpected. The colossal skeleton has been utterly wrecked. Fern immediately begs our protagonist for help. Shen Yu naturally wonders aloud what happened before asking how he can help. Fern tells him that he needs the tonic Shen Yu gave him in the previous chapter. When our protagonist mentions that he doesn't have any more, Fern becomes convinced he is done for. Hearing this, our protagonist insists that he hold on just a moment. He has decided to save the skeleton, knowing how valuable Fern has been this entire time. After leaving Fern waiting for 2 hours, the poor skeleton becomes even more convinced that he is going to die. But in the very next second, our protagonist finally arrives. He immediately faces a problem. The door is too small. Our protagonist explains that he has gone all out. He has bought a giant fish tank and prepared a calcium solution. All Fern needs to do is soak in it, and everything will be fine. In the next second, the ground begins to tremble and quake, prompting our protagonist to ask Fern what is happening. This is when Fern explains that they are currently in a secret passage leading to the undead world. At that moment, the passage is under attack by both humans and elves. Since he is too weak to fight, Fern hands our protagonist a spatial ring. In the next instant, he is sucked into it. Our protagonist quickly closes the door just before the explosion erupts, letting out a sigh of relief that neither of them has been caught in the blast. From inside the spatial ring, Fern explains how it works. It normally only affects objects, but because he is an undead being, it has worked on him as well. As expected, our protagonist thinks the skeleton has quite a collection of items. Still, he informs Fern of his plan to enter the realm. He can tell Fern isn't a normal soldier to be tasked with an assassination mission, so he hopes the skeleton will cooperate. Hearing this, Fern wonders aloud if he is mad, considering he has just been told about the human and elven invasion. Regardless, Fern decides to respect our protagonist's choice and begins sharing information. He first confirms Shen Yu's guess, he is actually a battlefield scavenger. However, he cannot keep the good stuff, as everything valuable has to be turned in to be used by powerful warriors. Hearing this, our protagonist asks if he has anything he can use to disguise himself as an undead. After all, Fern has mentioned earlier that the passage leads directly into the undead world, so he naturally needs a proper disguise. Without hesitation, Fern provides his entire collection. Our protagonist can't help but think most of the items are junk, as he wonders aloud if Fern is a trash collector. Eventually, he manages to piece together a decent set. However, one item in particular catches his attention. He naturally asks Fern about it. The skeleton explains that it is a horse token used to summon an undead horse. Fern then suggests that our protagonist look for a centurion mask. Shen Yu wonders what is so special about it. Fern explains that the mask will complete the set and turn him into a fully convincing undead soldier. Just like that, our protagonist transforms into an undead soldier. With the horse token in hand, he is already imagining the possibilities of becoming a ghost rider, though he plans to run away at the first sign of real danger. With that thought in mind, he decides it is finally time to enter the realm. Once our protagonist enters, he finds that the place is completely destroyed. The moment he manages to crawl out from the secret passage, he is immediately stopped by human soldiers. At first, he is confused to see them here. They decide to kill him since this is still undead territory. In the end, he reveals his identity, thinking the undead might have already lost. However, a knight still moves to kill him, believing our protagonist has betrayed humanity and sided with the undead. The moment this happens, our protagonist immediately blocks the attack with a dagger he picked up in the passage. This causes the knight to pause as he realizes the dagger is the nightshade. Confused, the realm system immediately explains to us that the dagger belongs to a human scout of white grade. Not only is it used for assassination, but it also emits a type of aura that reveals people with trustworthy and clean souls. Because of this, the knight helps our protagonist, pointing out that he possesses the nightshade and that the dagger's aura is clean and trustworthy. Now the knight makes a hand gesture and asks how he can help our protagonist. Shen Yu thinks to himself that the hand sign means "I love you" back on Earth, but he still believes it must be some secret password here. Our protagonist replies with the same hand sign, hoping to bluff his way through because he has no idea what to do. Nonetheless, the knight decides to offer help. This leaves our protagonist in shock as the two of them shake hands. Our protagonist thanks him, and the man introduces himself as Roman the moment our protagonist asks. Just then, someone arrives and interrupts their conversation. The man happens to be a baron with his soldiers. He questions what Roman is doing, to which the knight points out that he is only helping our protagonist. However, the baron immediately cuts him off and finds the situation suspicious. Since our protagonist crawled out from the secret passage, he ultimately concludes that he must be a spy. Even when Roman mentions the nightshade, the baron refuses to listen. Seeing this, our protagonist asks for the baron's name. The baron smugly and arrogantly introduces himself as Baron Warren of the Southern Eagle Castle and decides to punish our protagonist for daring to speak to him so directly. Hearing this, our protagonist, while secretly summoning his door, promises to remember the fool's name. Feeling threatened and insulted, the baron gives his men the kill order. However, to their shock, our protagonist suddenly disappears. Of course, the baron sees this and wonders aloud how it is even possible. At this point, Roman can only shake his head. He explains that the kingdom actually has nameless assassins who have joined this very battle. These assassins are masters operating in the shadows, and the baron has just foolishly given his name to one. Now the baron begins to piece things together and realizes the trouble he has just entered. Fearing for his life, he orders his men to retreat. Meanwhile, our protagonist has just completed his mission and exits the realm. He is slightly irritated to have run into the baron and even more annoyed that Fern didn't tell him anything about the human signs in their world. To which Fern replies, asking how he is supposed to know about human sign language when he is an undead to begin with. Now our protagonist becomes even more furious after ending up with the same One of Us green title again. Because of this, the system triggers a special event. It turns out he can receive an honorable title if the next title he obtains is the same. This title will resonate with powerful forces and awaken a latent ability. In addition, he has only one chance to obtain a latent ability. Our protagonist is surprised by this revelation. He also realizes it means that if his next title is not another One of Us, he will automatically miss his chance. As he turns to the supplies Roman gave him, he begins to analyze and piece together how he earned the title in the first place. Based on his understanding, he believes he needs to first be in enemy territory, just like in the elves' village and the human army. Next, he needs to receive an item that shows a kind of trust, like the supplies from Roman and the bracelet of nature from Laney. Lastly, he believes he must at the very least escape a dangerous situation, although he isn't 100% sure. However, before he can ponder further, his thoughts are interrupted by a message from the intercom. It turns out our protagonist has a visitor, and the person is a relative of the late officer Luo Faichuan. Hearing this, our protagonist expresses surprise, wondering if the people are perhaps investigating his murder privately. Eventually, he goes to meet the person on the rooftop. And just like that, we are introduced to the first waifu of the series. The girl begins the conversation by confirming our protagonist's identity. Our protagonist responds positively and unintentionally uses his realm system. To his shock, the girl happens to have a purple title, Great Swordsman. She introduces herself as Zhao Mengyu, Officer Luo Faichuan's little sister. Our protagonist is shocked for a few reasons. In this world, she is the first person he has seen with a title, not even Director Qian, as strong as he is, has one. Not to mention it is purple, which means the girl must be very powerful. Now he understands why Director Qian was anxious at the station the moment he discovered she was coming. Xiao Mengyu explains her purpose for coming to find him. While telling him what we already know, she reveals that the people who caused her brother's weapon to malfunction were his two classmates, who were jealous of him. Our protagonist is taken aback by the calmness of her tone as she casually reveals that she has killed them. Recovering, our protagonist asks if she really just killed two people. She confirms it. Apparently, Luo Faishuan comes from a noble family. Although he lacked talent unlike her, he still decided to risk his life when all she wanted was for her big brother to enjoy his life. Our protagonist can only listen as someone he thinks is powerful is casually brushed off as lacking talent. Seeing his expression, Zhao Mengyu asks why he isn't saying anything. Perhaps the idea of her seeking revenge doesn't sit well with him. Our protagonist anxiously explains that is not the case. He expresses that he was only wondering if killing people wouldn't get her in trouble. Seeing this, she understands. Even though our protagonist bears the name of the Shen noble household, he still has no idea how nobles operate. What she is trying to say is that doing something like this will not get her into trouble, because of her status in the Luo noble family. With that out of the way, she explains she came because the trail went cold the moment she killed the two classmates. Now she wants to know if our protagonist offended someone. Even a vague guess can help. Our protagonist admits he has no clue but insists she stop since she has already killed the two assassins responsible for her brother's death. However, she declares that it wasn't enough. With a gentle swing of her sword, she slices the clouds into two. Our protagonist watches in shock. He can only feel sorry for any fool who dares to break her heart. After displaying her strength, she insists our protagonist think carefully. After all, he is a member of the Shen clan, so there is a possibility he might have offended someone, most likely someone from a noble family. Hearing this, our protagonist honestly explains that he and his parents are treated as outcasts and do not interact much with his clan. However, he suggests she check the hospital because the moment his soul entered Shen Yu's body, he overheard screams. Hearing this, she decides to leave immediately while thanking him for his help. The moment the girl leaves, Director Qian suddenly appears. He comments about Zhao Mengyu's terrifying sword slash. Apparently, he only came because he was afraid she might blame our protagonist for her brother's death. Our protagonist listens as the director explains that both of them are in the same group and are about to enter the academy. Not to mention, she is the most talented member of the Luo family in her generation. The director tries to reassure our protagonist not to be disappointed in his own strength, but he reassures the director instead. He is greatly relieved that someone as strong as her is on his side. In truth, our protagonist would have been much stronger if he and his family had a good relationship with the Shen clan, meaning he would receive the same privileges as Zhao Mengyu. Although he acted nonchalant earlier in his room, he is frustrated. Strength is what rules this world. This means those noble bastards are not only at the top of civilization, but one of them, or someone connected to them, is casually trying to make his life miserable by targeting him. Knowing he cannot rely on Zhao Mengyu all the time, he asks Fern if he has any ability crystals to at least get an offensive ability. Unfortunately, Fern does not have any suitable crystals. The ones he possesses are only suitable for undead. And since our protagonist did not pick the Soulfire innate ability that would make him a necromancer, they are useless to him. As for the elf crystal, he only encountered that one by chance. Our protagonist finds this situation problematic. With the academy entrance exam approaching and assassins targeting him, he needs to learn an offensive ability as quickly as possible. But at that moment, he immediately remembers the supplies Roman gave him. After sorting through the bag, Shen Yu hits the jackpot when he discovers a crystal among the items inside. Now our protagonist is really looking forward to an offensive ability. Unfortunately, the crystal only carries a message. Fern explains that Roman must have thought our protagonist was part of the Shadowhand members for him to receive the crystal. Since our protagonist has already entered the Nightmare Realm for the day, he plans to enter again the next day and use the message to his advantage. With that, he begins planning with the skeleton after explaining what happened during his last visit to the Nightmare Realm. The following day, Fern provides our protagonist with a set of armor. He explains that this set belonged to soldiers from the Rhine borderlands. Since they were all wiped out, no one will question our protagonist if he claims to be the only survivor. As for the crystal, Fern also explains that it is a distress message from the Rhine Lord, which will serve as a token to verify his identity. It will come in handy. Our protagonist admits that he finds Fern very helpful today and asks the reason why. Fern explains that he is only repaying our protagonist for saving him. However, our protagonist notes that he is lying. Fern, sensing this, tells the truth. He wants our protagonist to progress faster so he can obtain S-rank items that will help him recover. The next scene takes us to the battlefield. There, soldiers are searching and helping survivors. From a distance, our protagonist closely observes what is happening. He thinks he must remain cautious. Otherwise, if he runs into the Baron or anyone who recognizes him, he will be in trouble. Since there are many bodies on the battlefield, our protagonist decides to gather information. Approaching a giant undead that is dead, he uses the murmur of the dark to make it speak. He shows the giant his centurion mask and asks if he has seen anyone with it. The giant responds in the negative. Hearing this, our protagonist tells the big guy to rest well and dashes off to his next target. After searching for a while, he eventually becomes exhausted, noting that trying to find what he is looking for is like searching for a needle in a haystack. But at that moment, someone catches his attention. He spots a dead werewolf. Since they have a good sense of smell, our protagonist decides to use that to his advantage. Using the murmur of the dark, he asks the wolf if it smells anything like the mask. The wolf points to a severed hand while correcting our protagonist that it is a wolf and not a dog. When our protagonist approaches, Fern comments that it seems like the person was obliterated by a burst type of magic. Our protagonist wonders if the murmur of the dark can work on the hand. To his shock, however, the severed hand actually makes the secret hand sign. Our protagonist becomes excited, believing this hand belongs to the person who owns the mask, and asks if the hand can tell him anything, to which the hand points in a certain direction, which turns out to be where his boot landed. The boot reeks badly, but Shen Yu finds something inside. One is a letter, while the other is an item. At this moment, the system prompts him, noting that our protagonist has discovered enough special items. As a result, he unlocks a new skill. This skill shows the description of any item. What he holds in his hand is the shadow insignia of blue quality. The insignia is etched with profound arcane runes, capable of activating a specific weapon. Seeing that the insignia is nearly worthless without the corresponding weapon, our protagonist reaches for his dagger. Predictably, it works. The dagger levels up from Nightshade to Nightfall. Nightfall is an exceptional dagger once wielded by high-ranking members of the Shadowhand Brotherhood. In addition to its deadly edge, it carries the blessing of shadows. As for the content of the letter, it turns out to be a mission briefing about the joint operation between the elves and humans. The assassins are tasked with gathering information that will help in the war, with huge rewards promised in exchange. Thanks to the crystal Roman gave him, our protagonist already knows the location of the Shadowhand Brotherhood in the human camp. Knowing there will be a reward for valuable information, our protagonist begins questioning the undead for anything useful while using his murmur of the dark. However, after countless attempts, he gets nothing. These are all foot soldiers who only follow orders. Seeing our protagonist in such a state, Fern offers to give him intel about the undead. At first, our protagonist is excited, but he quickly remembers that Fern is an undead and questions whether he really wants to sell out his own race. Hearing this, Fern simply tells him that he is currently despised by many undead. This is something our protagonist cannot argue with, because he has witnessed it firsthand. As for the information, our protagonist tells Fern he does not want anything earth-shattering. Fern reassures him that he is just a regular undead, but provides some details that will ensure he gets rewarded. The information concerns the undead artillery, which increases firing rate and power by 10 and 20% respectively. Our protagonist naturally wonders if this is too valuable. As he prepares to leave, Fern assures him it is not. He believes the humans already suspect this, so the information will simply act as confirmation. Eventually, our protagonist sees the camp. Just as he wonders how he will get in, Fern gives him an idea suggesting he pretend to be injured. Our protagonist notes that it is smart thinking. This causes our protagonist to ask about healthcare. Fern explains that humans use holy magic to heal, but the person needs to pay. Now that is strange. The undead, however, are completely different. Instead of normal treatment, Fern explains that they perform a ritual that takes the souls of the undead or the living. In simple words, they heal and recover by draining the life force of others. Because of this, our protagonist naturally thinks there is a problem since he is broke. Fern reassures him that he is actually loaded. With that, our protagonist comes up with a plan. Allocating all his stats to strength, our protagonist lifts a huge hammer. Fern becomes confused seeing this. In response, our protagonist insists Fern helps him because he might definitely need it later. With that, our protagonist drops the huge hammer on himself, making him cough out blood. Seeing this, Fern wonders aloud if this is not too extreme. Our protagonist explains that he needs to make the act convincing. And just like that, our protagonist begins hitting his shield while begging for help. Almost immediately, soldiers spot his location. Later at the human camp, the priestess uses healing magic on our protagonist. Once she finishes, she reports the results to the third prince, who tells her to leave and promises to send her payment shortly. Helping our protagonist up, the prince asks if he remembers anything. In response, our protagonist asks about his own identity. The blonde man introduces himself as Prince Norton. He notices the insignia on our protagonist's shield and asks if he comes from Rhine. Hearing this, our protagonist puts on an act and hands over the crystal that Roman gave him, saying it is urgent. Seeing the crystal, the mage immediately casts communication magic on it. As expected, the message is a distress call for help regarding the undead invasion in Rhine. The mage confirms the authenticity of the crystal, adding that the voice they just heard belongs to Lawrence. This convinces them that our protagonist came from Rhine. Unfortunately, as everyone already knows, Rhine has been destroyed by the undead. This makes our protagonist the only known survivor. Still, our protagonist maintains his act, pretending to be in shock from the news. Our protagonist deserves an Oscar. He begins calling out the names of supposed friends and family members, noting that everyone is now dead. Trying to comfort our protagonist, the prince tells him that surviving the journey and escaping under the massive undead horde is already a miracle. He decides to make arrangements for our protagonist to rest at the capital. However, if that happens, our protagonist will be unable to collect his reward from the Shadowhand Brotherhood. The prince becomes confused when our protagonist insists on staying on the battlefield. He wants to avenge his parents and kill as many undead as he can. Our protagonist lies so convincingly that everyone in the tent is moved by his resolve. Now convinced by such courage, the prince believes the Lord of Rhine must have chosen our protagonist because he possesses an extraordinary skill. Our protagonist immediately reveals that he is very fast for anyone his age. While saying this, he devours his title and allocates all points to agility. Just to demonstrate, our protagonist steps outside the tent. He immediately takes off running. His speed shocks everyone in the camp. After this display, our protagonist asks the prince whether this qualifies him to stay at the front lines. Of course, his resolve and skill convince everyone, but an elf among them notices something unusual. She suddenly walks up to our protagonist and asks where he got the bracelet. Our protagonist tells them the truth, saying an elf girl named Lainey gave it to him. To his shock, the elf begins chanting an elven spell. It turns out to be some kind of communication magic. Soon, Lainey appears and wonders who connected her. The female elf introduces herself as Eudoria, the archmage from the royal court, before asking why our protagonist has her bracelet. Now we can only hope our protagonist doesn't get caught in his lie. Lainey thankfully doesn't disappoint our protagonist. She even asks when he will come back to the elf village. Anyway, Eudoria tells Lainey to answer her questions, so she does, revealing everything our protagonist did, especially how he helped them uncover the undead spies. Eudoria seems to have gotten the information she wants, so she ends the transmission. She then speaks highly of Shen Yu, noting that he not only helps the elves and earns the recognition of the elf high priest, but also survives numerous calamities. Eudoria suggests sending our protagonist to study at the Imperial Academy. Prince Norton agrees and decides to make the necessary arrangements, but then he asks our protagonist for his name. Shen Yu immediately pretends that he has forgotten his own name. This is because he doesn't know the naming customs of this world, and he inwardly thanks the mage for assuming that he must be suffering from memory loss after the massive hammer blow to his head. Because of this, Prince Norton decides to give our protagonist a name. Our protagonist is given the title, The Boy Who Lived, and the realm system immediately confirms it as an official title. Naturally, our protagonist isn't happy with such a ridiculous title and wonders how to get rid of it. The system explains that self-created titles can't be devoured, but there are two ways to remove them. The first is to let people naturally forget by fading into the background. The second is to do something completely contrary to the title itself. Our protagonist thinks this is perfect because he can't simply use the first option. A bit curious, he wonders who this prince is that even his words alone can boost someone's reputation. Fern explains that Prince Norton is the eldest son of the royal family, the one who pushed for the human-elf alliance, and the heir to the throne. As Prince Norton and his companions walk away, our protagonist becomes the subject of their discussion. The mage notes that our protagonist isn't an ordinary talent because he spots him carrying Nightfall at such a young age. The prince agrees, adding that nightfall weapons are normally wielded only by high-ranking assassins. He admits he didn't expect this, and quickly orders his men to begin the arrangements they discussed earlier. The next scene takes us to a tent. Shen Yu steps inside the Shadow Hand tent, noting that it is just as the Crystal Roman gave him described. However, our protagonist soon realizes that he is being deliberately ignored. So, he greets the tent owner using the Shadow Hand Brotherhood's hand sign. The man immediately returns the greeting. Without wasting any time, our protagonist hands over the crystal containing the information Fern gave him, and the man finds it extremely valuable. In exchange, the man decides to show our protagonist what he has to offer. The first item is a dagger. After listening to the man's explanation, our protagonist finds it worthless because it simply makes a person appear dead when stabbed with it. Moving on, the man suddenly blows a whistle. A horse instantly appears, and in the next second it collapses. Seeing this, the man proudly explains that it is a horse that plays dead. Our protagonist can only wonder if it comes as a set with the dagger, and the man admits that our protagonist has a sharp eye. Because of this, he offers our protagonist a pair of glasses. Apparently, wearing them allows our protagonist to see through objects and even people's clothes. Our protagonist can only sigh since none of these items are useful, so he asks the man if he has any crystals that grant skills. Hearing this, the man immediately presents him with 2 crystals. The red crystal grants the bleeding ability, causing enemies to bleed whenever our protagonist inflicts damage on them. The second is a blue crystal that grants the Frostwind ability. It is essentially a defensive skill that knocks back enemies and sends them flying. Just then, our protagonist hears the same voice he heard when he first arrived in this world, telling him to choose Frostwind. When Shen Yu chooses the Frostwind, the Shadow Hand operative looks a bit confused. Meanwhile, the voice in our protagonist's head explains that although the ability seems worthless, he has already obtained 2 crystals. He only needs the remaining 2. Only then will he understand why, and the secret will be revealed. Hearing this is reason enough for our protagonist to take the crystal without hesitation. As he absorbs the crystal, the skills and techniques on how to use the ability naturally flow into his mind. The Shadow Hand Brotherhood operative then explains that Frostwind is a basic kicking technique and offers to give our protagonist something more valuable that matches the information he provided. Since our protagonist has nothing specific in mind, he hands him a sack of gold coins to cover the difference. The moment our protagonist steps out of the tent, he immediately asks Fern if he has any undead skills. Fern reminds him that they would be useless since our protagonist can only use them if he is a necromancer. But the moment our protagonist tells him he is looking for the Shadow Phantom, Fern is shocked that he knows about it. Still, he gives it to him because this ability does not require the necromancer condition. To use the ability, Shen Yu has to reallocate some of his points to agility and spirit. After arriving at a secluded place, Shen Yu immediately tests the skill. After testing it, Shen Yu can tell the ability is only meant for scaring people. Fern chimes in, wondering why our protagonist keeps choosing only trash abilities. Our protagonist tells Fern that he wouldn't understand, while thinking that all he needs now is the Thunder Palm crystal. Later, our protagonist meets with a soldier. The man has come to deliver Prince Norton's rewards. Our protagonist receives the rewards and promises to serve the kingdom. Before leaving, the soldier insists that he head to the capital and join the Imperial Military Academy. Our protagonist agrees on the surface, but in his mind he thinks that the gold he received will be enough to help his parents. The next scene takes us to the real world. Our protagonist sells the gold and makes a massive profit. Moments after transferring the funds to his parents, his phone begins ringing. Of course it is his parents. Like any normal parents, they wonder how he got the money. He explains that it is part of the benefits of joining the association. Speaking of which, our protagonist just remembers he hasn't checked his phone for an entire day. Naturally, there are tons of messages. One of them is from Zhao Yibing. She apologizes and hopes they can make up now that he has joined the Human Martial Arts Association. Shen Yu admits that the girl is really beautiful, but unfortunately at this point she is no longer the prize because they are now on completely different levels. Right on cue, a message pops up from his best friend. Our protagonist immediately agrees to hang out. However, he is a bit afraid since he is still a target of assassination. Still, he cannot deny the friendship between him and Chen Haoyu. Because of Shen Yu's emotions, he agrees. To his relief, however, his friend actually wants to come to the association because it is one of his dreams. Our protagonist finds this very helpful and immediately agrees. They plan to have dinner together. At the waiting area, our protagonist spots a group of people. The overwhelming aura radiating from them feels dangerous. Because of this, he naturally wonders if these are the pros director Kian arranged to protect him. Just then, a large guy suddenly locks eyes with him. Approaching, he asks if Shen Yu is the Rookie of the Year. Shen Yu confirms and quickly apologizes for staring too much. Seeing his nervousness, the guy assures him it is fine. Back when he was a rookie, he did exactly the same thing. This makes our protagonist ask if he did so because he wanted to be like them. The man shakes his head, stating that back then he only ever wanted to crush the arrogant bastards and tear them to shreds. This leads our protagonist to realize that the aura these people are emitting is deliberate. They are simply showing off. Just then, the guy shifts his attention to a lady pro who is approaching them. Seeing her, he tries to invite her to grab dinner later. But to our protagonist's shock, she actually pulls out her gun and threatens to kill him if he dares harass her again. The big guy immediately takes the hint and leaves. The lady then informs our protagonist that his friend is waiting and that they have already confirmed his ID. Our protagonist wants to go get Chen Haoyu by himself, but the lady shakes her head. Because the director has already informed them about his situation, they must keep him safe. Our protagonist can only agree. Later, Chen Haoyu is brought up and immediately cannot hold back his enthusiasm. The boy starts talking about how the school almost exploded the moment everyone heard that our protagonist had joined the Human Martial Arts Association. Our protagonist leads him to an elevator and suggests they chat over a meal, but his bro claims he is not hungry and insists they look around first. The moment the elevator door opens, the people the director arranged are inside. Nonetheless, both of them enter. Our protagonist informs his friend that he stays on the 105th floor. Chen Haoyu is naturally shocked, but at that moment his phone buzzes with a notification. The message comes from Zhao Mengyu. She explains that on the day our protagonist was attacked by the anomaly at the hospital, a nurse saw everything. Unfortunately, she is currently missing. They found a body, but they are still trying to identify who it belongs to. She also found something very disturbing. Our protagonist is left in shock as Zhao Mengyu explains that from the footage, she believes the person in question is the one who killed the nurse. In addition, the person was acting extremely suspicious that day. Of course, that person just happens to be his best friend. Xiao Mengyu's recent message reveals that Chen Haoyu was looking for the protagonist around school on the day of the mock exam, the exact time the protagonist was in the Nightmare Realm completing the elf mission. So now he wonders why Chen Haoyu would be searching for him even at school. Our protagonist looks at Chen Haoyu like someone he does not recognize, while Xiao Mengyu's final message warns him to be careful if he runs into Chen Haoyu. Exiting the elevator, Chen Haoyu remains all excited and maintains his earlier enthusiasm, while our protagonist keeps his distance. They are heading to Shen Yu's room when Chen Haoyu suddenly points and asks if this is it. Before our protagonist can respond, he pulls out a pen and attacks. However, in the next moment, Chen Haoyu realizes he hid an illusion. Gritting his teeth, he never expected our protagonist to possess such high-level martial arts. But in that instant, he is kicked from behind by our protagonist. The realm system explains that since our protagonist has used all 3 crystal abilities, he unlocks the incomplete heaven-shattering Frost Moon. The effect of this skill increases his strength, agility, and mental prowess slightly. When our protagonist asks the imposter about his friend, the man laughs and moves to kill him, declaring that he should join Chen Haoyu in the afterlife. Our protagonist kicks him, but the assassin blocks the attack and even mocks him. In the next second, however, he is knocked back. This is the effect of Frost Wind, a guaranteed knockback from any hit our protagonist delivers. Our protagonist pulls out a gun while noting that what the mysterious voice said about the combination of the abilities was not a lie. He begins firing at the assassin, who shows he is highly skilled at maneuvering. Seeing that the gun is empty, the assassin mocks our protagonist for having the worst aim. However, to his shock, our protagonist casually points out that he was never aiming at him. Right after, the alarm is activated. Immediately, reinforcements are deployed to the top floor. Before the assassin can even react, his limbs are torn off by bullets. The lady with the gun from earlier appears, looking a bit irritated that the assassin used a skin-shifting technique and even used pens as weapons. No wonder he bypassed security. Now furious, she demands to know his objectives and who sent him. In response, the assassin tells her she will not get anything from him before biting down on something in his mouth. It turns out the man had hidden a poison capsule in his mouth. The woman feels stupid for not knocking him out earlier. Now she can only hope Director Qian does not scold her, and that the autopsy gives them a clue. Seeing this, our protagonist naturally decides to stay clear of her. Later in the morgue, Miss Wenna reports everything to Director Qian while apologizing and waiting to get scolded. Contrary to her expectations, however, Director Qian tells her it is not her fault. Even the AI failed to detect the assassin. In addition, the autopsy leads nowhere, meaning the assassin is really good at hiding. Hearing this, our protagonist insists they give him some space. Director Qian agrees and takes Miss Wenna along because he knows our protagonist has some kind of ability to communicate with the dead. Predictably, our protagonist uses Murmur of the Dark. As a result, the assassin's soul forcefully returns to his corpse. Even so, the man mocks our protagonist because he is not going to tell him anything. This makes our protagonist ask Fern what will happen. Fern admits he has no clue and suggests they watch together. Almost immediately, they are taken to the underworld. Now the assassin is left confused. He starts getting tortured and scorched to a crisp. To the assassin's disbelief, after getting scorched, he does not die and his body regenerates completely. Just like that, the process continues. While this is happening, Fern explains to our protagonist that the assassin will go through an endless cycle of torture, each one worse than the last and even longer. Shockingly, this entire process happens for billions of years, but to Fern and our protagonist, it occurs literally within 3 seconds. As expected, the assassin finally cracks and is ready to talk. Now they return to the Human Martial Arts Association morgue. Seeing this, Fern is excited and even hopes he could watch it again. The guy is a menace. Our protagonist begins recording while dialing someone and tells the assassin to tell him everything. A few minutes earlier, at a different location, Zhao Yibing happens to be chatting with someone. Apparently, her apology message was actually an instruction from someone named Han. Since she failed, her mysterious benefactor gives her an address and insists she come and not be late. As if on cue, she receives a call informing her about being accepted into a scholarship program at one of the academies. Naturally, she thanks her benefactor and promises to come see him. But at that moment, Zhao Mengyu suddenly appears, startling Zhao Yibing as she insists she hand over her phone. Of course, Zhao Yibing naturally refuses, since she has no clue who Zhao Mengyu is. In response, Zhao Mengyu moves and stops her sword just inches from Zhao Yibing's face. Zhao Mengyu tells the clueless girl that she knows the only thing she has is her prettiness. In order not to become a liability, she insists Zhao Yibing hand the phone over. As a result, she has no choice but to hand it over. Now this is the moment Zhao Mengyu finally connects with our protagonist as he informs her that the assassin is about to confess everything. Hearing our protagonist's name sends chills down Zhao Yibing's spine as she thinks Zhao Mengyu came to kill her. Ignoring her, she listens as the assassin begins to spit everything out. He reveals they are assassins from the League of Assassins. They received a joint contract to kill our protagonist and make it look like an accident. When the first attempt was not successful, they staged an anomaly at the hospital. He also killed our protagonist's best friend to check around the hospital. When he discovered the eyewitness, he naturally captured her. Now things became tricky when our protagonist escaped for the second time. In addition, they did not understand why the curse statue did not kill him, so this is the reason they took out Officer Luo Faishuan to get close to our protagonist, learn what happened, and end him in the process. Since Officer Luo Faishuan's body was found in the locker of his office, our protagonist asks about the location of Chen Haoyu's corpse. His expression darkens when Zhao Mengyu reveals that the unidentified body they discovered earlier was actually his best friend's. Even worse, Chen Haoyu's corpse was found in the school's sewer. Because of this, our furious protagonist asks who hired them. Unfortunately, the assassin does not know, only the head of the operation knows. As for where and who the person is, the assassin explains to our protagonist that the man is called the Skinner, a notorious assassin in the underworld, and the assassin's skin-shifting trick was done by the man himself. Our protagonist listens as the assassin explains that the eyewitness is currently in his mansion. In addition, the man is so strong that he has no weakness. This makes our protagonist ask why he did not come after him himself since he is so strong. The assassin explains that it would be a stain on the Skinner's reputation. Still, our protagonist tells the assassin to at least give him anything specific about the man. To their shock, the assassin reveals that the man is a cannibal. Even more shocking, Zhao Mengyu decides to visit the man personally, despite our protagonist's attempts to stop her. Seeing this, the assassin bursts into laughter. He believes that if she goes, things won't end well for her because the Skinner enjoys preying on delicate young women the most. Fed up, our protagonist punches the assassin straight in the face. He tells the idiot not to answer what he was not asked before deactivating his skill. The next scene takes us to Maplewood Mansion, belonging to the Skinner. Inside, the man of the hour is enjoying a meal. The man turns into a critic as he comments on the meal's taste and sensation. As for the wine, which turns out to be blood, he feels it goes well with the meat. Shockingly enough, the entire meal and wine come from the body of the nurse who was the eyewitness. In the middle of his sick hobby, his phone suddenly buzzes. Sure enough, the person happens to be Han, who insists he takes care of our protagonist personally. The Skinner cannot believe the man wants him to kill our protagonist by himself. Well, it is only natural because 3 of his associates he sent have died. Still, the Skinner asks what Han will give in return. Han offers to give him a girl. The Skinner replies that he is not a scavenger and has high standards. However, he freezes the moment he sees the girl is Zhao Yibing. No one expected the man to be this perverted. To the point even the translator agrees. Because of this, he abandons his meal and decides to prepare to meet Zhao Yibing. But he pauses in his tracks as if he remembers something. He almost forgot about the nurse. He declares it is the end of their relationship while using some kind of thread to disassemble her body, noting that he cannot scare Zhao Yibing. In the next chapter, our protagonist receives a gift from the world government AI. When the package is revealed, our protagonist expresses shock that it is actually a bike. Director Kian corrects him, stating that it is not just a motorcycle. The features of the bike are amazing. Not only is it integrated with the AI itself, but it can even fly. Our protagonist really likes the bike, but expresses that red will really be an eye-catching color. Hearing this, the AI immediately switches the color of the bike. As for the reason behind the gift, Director Chian explains that Kunlun, the AI, thinks our protagonist's situation is dangerous, so it made the bike for him to escape. Since Kunlun is so amazing, our protagonist wonders why the AI does not just find out who wants him dead. Unfortunately, Director Chian explains that Kunlun assesses situations based on the person's value. In simple words, our protagonist is not valuable enough for the AI to find out who wants him dead. Our protagonist expected as much. The AI did not even react the moment Officer Luo Faishuan got killed and was placed in his locker. Just as one would expect in a world ruled by strength. Director Chian insists that our protagonist rest, because the following day is the entrance exam to the academy. At the same time, Zhao Mengyu arrives with Zhao Yibing at the Skinner's mansion. The entire time, Zhao Yibing has been terrified, wondering why Zhao Mengyu followed her here. As for Zhao Mengyu, she can sense the overwhelming killing intent leaking from the mansion. Before proceeding, Zhao Mengyu asks if Zhao Yibing's so-called sponsor really lives inside this building. Zhao Yibing confirms, noting that her mission was to sabotage our protagonist in exchange for resources and a chance to take the entrance academy exams. However, Zhao Mengyu points out that this means her mission failed since our protagonist joined the Human Martial Arts Association. Zhao Yibing does not understand the underlying meaning behind those words. In her mind, Zhao Mengyu understands. After all, Zhao Yibing comes from a simple background and has no idea what will happen to her, because she made a pact with the devil and failed to deliver. Trying to help her, Zhao Mengyu tells her that Zhao Yibing has 2 choices. The first is to turn back and forget what happens the moment she enters the mansion. The second is that Zhao Yibing enters the mansion, sees her so-called sponsor, and whatever happens to her will be entirely her own doing. Unfortunately, Zhao Yibing does not listen and heads straight into the mansion. Zhao Mengyu can only shake her head at this point. The sacrificial lamb has willingly entered the wolf's den. Inside, she is led by the butler to meet the Skinner. The moment the pervert bastard lays eyes on her, the man suddenly appears before her, flattering and complimenting her appearance. She accepts the Skinner, not knowing she is about to become a dinner menu. The 2 of them begin discussing matters, and Zhao Yibing, like a clueless girl, hopes to repay him someday for helping her. But in that instant, the wind suddenly becomes strong. Zhao Yibing immediately clings to the Skinner's arm, noting that the wind is cold. Unfortunately, that is not wind at all. It is Zhao Mengyu's sword intent lingering around them. The Skinner covers her with his coat. He knows whoever the sword intent belongs to is most likely targeting him. And just like that, the 2 of them resume talking about the entrance exams, while the Skinner looks for the perfect moment to devour her. During the conversation, Zhao Yibing is stunned. In her thoughts, the Skinner has just guaranteed her a top spot at one of the top 3 academies. Naturally, she asks if he is serious. He confirms, stating that his great contributions have made Kunlun recognize his merits. Just then, Zhao Yibing stares at her phone in utter shock because she has just been qualified to enter one of the top 3 academies. As a result, she thanks the Skinner sincerely. Meanwhile, the man looks at her and realizes that the time has come. And just like that, she meets her end. Immediately, the Skinner uses his blood threads to stitch her head back to her neck. To him, he has just created yet another masterpiece. Seeing this, the man can barely contain his joy, but in the next instant, he is hit by a sword aura. The sword aura destroys part of the mansion. Zhao Mengyu immediately enters through the destroyed path and checks on Zhao Yibing. Seeing no physical response from Zhao Yibing, Zhao Mengyu realizes she is a step too late. Initially, she thought her sword aura would scare the Skinner from making any move, but the man proves to be crazier than she imagined. At that moment, the Skinner charges toward Zhao Mengyu, declaring that Zhao Yibing now belongs to him. In response, Zhao Mengyu calmly moves her sword and stops it at Zhao Yibing's neck. She tells the Skinner that if he moves, she will destroy Zhao Yibing's corpse. She then demands to know Han's identity. After taking a closer look at her, the Skinner realizes she is the genius of the younger generation from the Luo family. He calmly points out that she is surrounded by his blood threads, which are impossible to break. For the sake of the Luo family, the Skinner is willing to let everything go, but to his shock, Zhao Mengyu intensifies her sword aura, challenging him to see which of them is stronger. Because of this, the Skinner becomes frustrated. Now the man does not just want Zhao Yibing, he also wants to taste Zhao Mengyu too. The bastard is clearly not normal and begins to go through some kind of transformation. Seeing this, Zhao Mengyu notes to herself that she cannot make him reveal the information about the employer like this. Because of this, she offers to make a deal with the Skinner. After getting the Skinner's attention, Zhao Mengyu offers not to destroy Zhao Yibing's corpse and even lets him try to kill her in exchange for the identity of his employer. The Skinner scoffs. In his eyes, he can easily kill her and take her dead body anyway. In response, Zhao Mengyu points out that if he agrees, she will not destroy Zhao Yibing's corpse. In addition, she will ensure the Luo family does not come after him regardless of the outcome of the fight. The Skinner thinks about it for a moment before asking if she is serious. Zhao Mengyu confirms positively. The Skinner notes that this is a bit complicated because it is an ironclad rule of the League of Assassins not to reveal the identity of their employers, to which Zhao Mengyu asks if this means he is scared. Of course, the man disagrees. He claims that for someone like her, he is willing to go against the League of Assassins more than 1,000 times. Zhao Mengyu feels disgusted hearing this while the Skinner takes it as a compliment. Still, he takes Zhao Yibing's corpse and tells Zhao Mengyu that the moment he reveals the name of his employer, the fight officially begins. Before we find out what happens next, the scene shifts back to our protagonist. Of course, our protagonist is worried for Zhao Mengyu since he believes she went to find the Skinner alone. Turning to Fern, he asks what the chances are that Zhao Mengyu could win. Fern asks if he wants the unfiltered truth. Our protagonist is left in shock, as Fern casually admits she has no chance. After a long explanation, our protagonist understands the huge difference in their strength. After all, the Skinner is the owner of the statue that killed the original Shen Yu, meaning the man's power is definitely from a different dimension. Now this makes our protagonist realize that, with what Fern explained, Zhao Mengyu is in serious danger. Our protagonist wants to help despite knowing his own situation. Not to mention, Zhao Mengyu is currently fighting alone with everything she has. While thinking about helping her, his thoughts are interrupted when his phone suddenly begins to ring. The moment he answers, the person on the other side immediately asks for help. After listening, our protagonist realizes in shock that the person is actually the daughter of the nurse who saw everything the day the original Shen Yu died. Because of this, our protagonist immediately asks for her location and tells her to stay put and wait for him. Fern instantly voices his suspicion, wondering if this is not a trap. Our protagonist explains that is why he is taking the bike given to him by the AI. Even after reassuring Fern that if things become dangerous he can escape using the gate, Fern still does not like the idea of him endangering himself. Our protagonist makes it clear that he can only rely on himself. This is because assassins from the League will never talk, and he can only get information from them using Murmur of the Dark. Fern points out that it is meaningless but begins to panic when he sees our protagonist heading to the edge of the highest floor. Thinking our protagonist is trying to fly with the bike, Fern reminds him that will alert the building. This is when our protagonist reveals he actually plans to jump from the highest floor. Our protagonist allocates all his points to agility. Still, Fern worriedly points out that even with 30 points in agility, there is no way he will land safely. Our protagonist just stands there, farming aura as he tells Fern that there are some things a man must do by himself. Just like Miles Morales, our protagonist takes his own leap of faith. Meanwhile, the poor skeleton is left screaming for his life. A furious Fern tells our protagonist that if he dies, he will make sure to resurrect him and force him to live the rest of his life as a zombie. Shen Yu doesn't respond. Instead, he summons his gate to the other realm. The moment he enters, he immediately resummons the gate back to Earth. Just like that, our protagonist keeps repeating the process until he eventually reaches the ground with a perfect landing. Of course, Fern immediately points out that he is completely crazy and refuses to admit that he is impressed. Nonetheless, our protagonist pulls out Ghostfire, his bike, from the storage ring. After entering the password, he immediately heads to the location of the nurse's child. Arriving at the west side of the city, our protagonist believes he has reached the right place. He enters the building and is surprised to discover that the person he has been talking to over the phone is a little girl. Almost in tears, she asks if he knows where her mother is because she hasn't seen her for a long time. Our protagonist decides to call the police first to report the case. Unfortunately, no one answers. The little girl insists that her mother is still alive and begs our protagonist to help find her. After explaining where her mother is likely to be, our protagonist decides to take the girl somewhere safe first. He tells Ghostfire to take her to the Human Martial Arts Association and then return to him. Even then, the little girl admits that she is scared and worried about her mother, while our protagonist does his best to reassure her. He tells her to be a good little girl and wait for him at the association because he will definitely come back with her mother. As he watches her leave, Fern questions whether he is really going to search for the girl's mother. Our protagonist admits that he has no choice. After all, the woman only got involved because of him. Hearing this, Fern calls him soft-hearted. He then asks if our protagonist has noticed anything strange since they entered the neighborhood. Thinking about it, our protagonist realizes that something does feel off. He listens as Fern explains that, as an undead, he can sense the life force of everything around them. In other words, there isn't a single living soul in the entire west side of the city. Just then, our protagonist hears a loud noise. As expected, the Skinner's mansion happens to be in the same area. As a result, our protagonist decides to check it out while telling Fern to watch his back. The moment our protagonist steps foot into the mansion, a female butler appears and asks if he made a reservation. However, Fern immediately tells him that the woman is dead. Shen Yu instantly becomes alert and uses the murmur of the dark, demanding to know how she can be dead and still standing. The woman explains that the master of the mansion killed everyone and uses his threads to bind and control their souls, ensuring they obey his every command. Our protagonist asks why she is not attacking him. She explains that her master is currently occupied and has not given any further instructions. She then reveals that everyone around her is dead. Naturally, our protagonist asks what she means. The woman explains that everyone in the entire block, as well as everyone inside the mansion, is dead. Now it makes sense why Fern could not sense a single soul the moment they arrived in the western part of the city. Our protagonist is suddenly pulled from his thoughts by a strange sound, and he immediately heads toward its source. Following Fern's directions, our protagonist reaches a room. The moment he opens the door, he is horrified by what he sees. The sight looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Fern shares his thoughts, and our protagonist uses the murmur of the dark to see if anyone recognizes him. At that moment, a nurse suddenly calls out his name. She explains that our protagonist encountered an anomaly at the hospital during her shift. Seeing her in such a state, our protagonist apologizes, believing that she died because of him. She tells him there is no need to be sorry because it was never his fault. However, if he can, she begs him to avenge them. Our protagonist promises to do something, but when he mentions her daughter, the nurse becomes confused. It is obvious that the girl who called him is not her daughter. Just then, a massive explosion rocks the entire place. Our protagonist wonders aloud what is happening, and Fern immediately reports that the two people are fighting. He can sense one of them falling, and their life force is rapidly weakening. Because of this, our protagonist realizes that the person falling must be Zhao Mengyu. Without hesitation, he catches her in midair. Stunned, Zhao Mengyu immediately asks what he is doing there. Our protagonist says it is a long story, but he came to help. She fires back, asking what he thinks he can accomplish with his current strength. When our protagonist insists that they plan on surviving, she can only sigh. She explains that she intentionally lowered her aura to make the Skinner lower his guard so she could launch a counterattack. Still, with our protagonist present, having a backup plan is not a bad idea. Assuming that is the case, she is about to suggest something, but our protagonist suddenly knocks her unconscious. He apologizes, noting that with Zhao Mengyu's strength, he had to allocate all of his stat points to strength just to put her to sleep. With that, our protagonist immediately summons his realm gate and rushes inside. Not long after, the Skinner appears, thinking Zhao Mengyu is simply playing hide-and-seek. And just like that, he begins counting, casually remarking that she cannot hide anywhere in the mansion because his threads are everywhere. In the next chapter, our protagonist enters the realm with Zhao Mengyu. He immediately tells Fern to find something suitable for Zhao Mengyu to wear. However, our protagonist doesn't expect what comes next. He ends up carrying Zhao Mengyu while she is dressed in a bunny suit that slightly boosts her stats. Seeing his reaction, Fern explains that it was the only suitable item he could find, causing our protagonist to question whether this is really the kind of equipment Fern finds on a battlefield. Nonetheless, our protagonist arrives at the Imperial human camp. The priests immediately recognize him as the boy who lived, and our protagonist can only complain inwardly. Putting that aside, the priests notice that Zhao Mengyu is wearing the epic bunny battlefield suit and point out the severity of her injuries. Our protagonist insists that they begin treating her immediately, offering the money the prince gave him. One of the priests takes the pouch and asks if this isn't the money the prince gave our protagonist for his Imperial Military Academy tuition. The pouch itself bears the royal crest, making it extremely valuable even without the money inside. Seeing this, our protagonist shouts for them to start the healing process and tells them to take everything. The priests immediately agree and begin healing Zhao Mengyu. As our protagonist watches, he cannot help but wonder if it is really necessary for every priest to work together. At that moment, the realm system chimes in with a notification. Apparently, thanks to rescuing Zhao Mengyu and sparing no expense to save her, our protagonist has become even more famous. This means the title he hates the most has just become even stronger. Just then, the priests excitedly announce that the healing is complete. They explain that the healing magic they used is so powerful that Zhao Mengyu will definitely wake up within a few minutes. Fern agrees, noting that her life force is much stronger than before. With that, our protagonist thanks the priests and carries Zhao Mengyu away. Watching them leave, the soldiers conclude that she must be our protagonist's woman because the amount of money he spent to save her is enough to marry several wives and still have plenty left over. Returning to the real world, Zhao Mengyu slowly wakes up. The moment our protagonist asks if she is finally awake, she immediately draws her sword and demands to know if he did anything to her. Our protagonist quickly explains that he simply healed her and that the process only works if the patient is unconscious. Feeling slightly embarrassed, Zhao Mengyu realizes that she misjudged him, while our protagonist apologizes for knocking her out without properly explaining his plan. But in the next moment, he suddenly freezes. A radiant golden aura begins to surround Zhao Mengyu, and her title has been upgraded to Holy Guardian for the next 3 hours. She can feel the effects as well, and with her newfound power, she becomes even more confident that she can finally kill the Skinner. Our protagonist is about to learn the identity of the person or people who want him dead, but unfortunately the Skinner appears at that very moment. Radiating overwhelming killing intent, he immediately notices the coincidence after spotting our protagonist. Seeing this, Zhao Mengyu suggests that unless our protagonist has strong combat abilities, he should hide. She admits that she previously underestimated the Skinner. Hearing this, our protagonist immediately leaves, wishing her good luck. This surprises Zhao Mengyu, making her assume that he must only be skilled in healing. Because of this, she concludes that she has to rely on herself. So when the Skinner asks where he went, Zhao Mengyu responds by launching a simple strike. Thanks to her buff, the power of the attack is amplified several times over, to the point where more than half of the mansion is destroyed. However, the Skinner manages to dodge at the last moment, expressing genuine surprise. The girl cannot believe he actually dodged it. Because of this, the Skinner becomes even more intrigued. Not only did the protagonist survive the wicked ghost statue and heal Zhao Mengyu, but he also strengthened her. Regardless, the Skinner calmly states that it does not matter. He suggests they resume their passionate embrace. Meanwhile, at the Imperial camp in the other realm, the priests are discussing our protagonist and Zhao Mengyu. One priest shamelessly claims he feels bad that our protagonist spent so much money to heal her, so he discreetly places a few gold coins inside Zhao Mengyu's bunny suit. Another priest stares at him as if he has just admitted to being a pervert. Soon after, the group is shocked when another priest admits he used buff magic on her as a token of respect. The reason for their shock is that each of them also used different but similar buffing spells. In the end, they realize that their combined buffs have transformed Zhao Mengyu into a holy guardian, doubling the effect of all blessings for 3 hours. They immediately realize they have made a serious mistake, as this blessing is strictly reserved for royalty and cannot be granted without permission. Because of this, they decide to keep it to themselves and hope the protagonist does not find out, calling it merely a token of respect. Back in the battle, despite the power of the Holy Guardian buff, Zhao Mengyu realizes the Skinner is far stronger than before. She cannot understand how he suddenly grew stronger, especially when she begins hearing faint chanting sounds from nowhere. The chanting grows louder and more distinct. This prompts her to attack its source. To her absolute horror, she realizes the ones chanting are dead corpses. Seeing this, the Skinner calmly smiles and explains that they are actually singing for them. He declares that this is their wedding hymn as he slowly pulls out a ring, and now the truth behind what happened to the western part of the city is finally revealed. Our protagonist, instead of running away to find somewhere safe, heads straight into the Skinner's mansion. Of course, Fern wonders aloud if he has gone mad and insists that they escape, but our protagonist refuses. He demands to know why the corpses are suddenly chanting. Besides, he still needs to help Zhao Mengyu, so he cannot leave now. While our protagonist continues searching for something, Fern explains that the Skinner is using an insane blood fiend curse that makes him stronger with every passing second. Eventually, our protagonist finds what he is looking for, causing Fern to wonder what is so special about his discovery. Our protagonist simply tells him that it is time to put the world power to the test. Fern is almost in disbelief as he realizes what our protagonist is really planning. Meanwhile, the corpses continue chanting, and the Skinner is still being dramatic as he proposes to Zhao Mengyu. He even plans to use his blood threads to make her a wedding gown. In response, she instantly cuts down all the threads. Mid-attack, however, she pauses because the threads have tangled around her sword. Seeing this, the Skinner suddenly appears before her and is about to slip the ring onto her finger. Zhao Mengyu immediately activates a mechanism hidden within her sword and, in the process, delivers a slash across the Skinner's face. The Skinner voices his surprise because he never expected her to have a sword hidden inside her own sword. Unfortunately, thanks to the Blood Fiend curse, he is practically invincible. He admires her determination but notes that the outcome has already been decided. Zhao Mengyu disagrees as she wields her 2 swords, each radiating a different aura. The Skinner watches with interest and recognizes the technique. It is her family's legendary swordsmanship, and he never expected her to have mastered the Luofu Sun-Moon obstruction at such a young age. Even so, he claims it will make no difference. Zhao Mengyu simply tells him to get lost. With that, she charges forward. The Skinner smiles at her attack and makes his own move, summoning the twin-headed serpent demon by sacrificing the souls within the mansion. Because of this, Zhao Mengyu finds herself in a difficult situation. She does not have enough time to dodge the monster's attack. Thankfully, Shen Yu enters at the very last second and steps in with a clutch save. Both the Skinner and Zhao Mengyu are stunned when they hear his voice. Apparently, our protagonist is using the mansion's sound system to amplify his murmur of the dark skill. The corpses immediately stop chanting the Blood Fiend curse. Instead, they cry out in pain and agony when our protagonist asks them how they feel. The Skinner watches in shock as his twin-headed serpent demon is forcibly unsummoned. Of course, he has no idea what just happened. Unfortunately for him, Zhao Mengyu seizes the opportunity and attacks, giving him no time to figure it out. Her twin-blade assault lands squarely on the Skinner, dealing massive damage. Seeing this, she naturally assumes the battle is over. To her shock, however, the Skinner manages to regain control. The corpses begin chanting once again, and Zhao Mengyu realizes that her attack was not enough to finish him off. The moment the Skinner recovers and suggests they continue their fight, our protagonist immediately jumps in again. This time, he suggests that everyone sing a popular song together. To everyone's absolute shock, our protagonist leads the corpses in singing Happy Birthday, preventing them from chanting the Blood Fiend curse and leaving the Skinner visibly frustrated. Even Zhao Mengyu is listening, while doing her best not to laugh. Fed up with the situation, The Skinner becomes extremely furious and starts swearing at our protagonist. Naturally, he decides to target Shen Yu instead of focusing on Zhao Mengyu. Zhao Mengyu notices this immediately. Fern notices as well and insists that now is the perfect time to run. Before escaping, Shen Yu grabs the headset, leading the corpses in yet another song and deliberately preventing them from chanting the Blood Fiend curse. But in that instant, the Skinner suddenly appears right in front of him. The man is absolutely furious. At the same time, Zhao Mengyu steps in front of our protagonist and defensively tells him to run while she covers his escape. Seeing this, the Skinner threatens to kill both of Shen Yu's parents if he dares to flee. However, Shen Yu completely ignores the threat and dashes off. When the Skinner vows to kill and eat his parents right in front of him, our protagonist simply responds by raising his middle finger before making his escape. Later, after escaping, our protagonist is seen pacing around, wondering what he can do next. Fern notices his frustration but points out that, with his current strength, getting involved is practically asking to be killed. He also reminds him that they only got lucky because of the Murmur of the Dark skill. Surprisingly, our protagonist agrees. He knows he is no match for the Skinner and asks if Fern could deal with him instead. Fern scoffs, calling the Skinner a small fry that he could easily crush if he were in his prime. Unfortunately, he is far too weak right now and even relies on our protagonist for help. Hearing this is enough for our protagonist to begin forming a plan. Fern is surprised when our protagonist brings up their contract, because this time he wants to make a deal. He wants Fern to defeat the Skinner, and in return he promises to help the skeleton return to his prime. As for how he plans to do that, our protagonist reminds Fern about the ritual he described earlier, the one the undead in his realm used to recover their strength. Fern nods, saying that it would indeed be enough to restore him. However, he soon realizes in shock that our protagonist plans to use the corpses inside the Skinner's mansion to fuel the ritual. Our protagonist asks if there is a problem. Fern shakes his head. In truth, he explains that the corpses in the mansion are perfect, even high grade, thanks to the Skinner's magic that binds the souls of the dead to their bodies. Even so, Fern warns that the moment the Skinner discovers their plan, things will become extremely dangerous. Our protagonist isn't worried. He tells Fern to stop stalling. Fern finally agrees to make the contract. Our protagonist signs it, even allowing Fern to claim his soul and turn him into an undead if he dies. After signing, our protagonist asks Fern to recite the ritual spell while he records it on his phone. When Fern complains that something so significant is being treated in such a robotic way, our protagonist points out that they don't have time for him to learn it properly. Recording it is simply the safest option. Regardless, Fern recites the ritual 3 times. Once he has a clear recording, our protagonist immediately allocates all of his stat points to agility. With that, he bolts off, using the mansion's sound system to address the corpses trapped inside. As he runs, he tells them to repeat every word after him once he finishes speaking. Both the Skinner and Zhao Mengyu listen as our protagonist replays the recording. At that moment, our protagonist activates Murmur of the Dark. Just like that, every corpse in the mansion begins chanting the ritual, calling upon the Lord of the Abyss and the Underworld. The Skinner immediately realizes that it is an incantation. Meanwhile, Fern excitedly notes that it is working. The souls are gathering at a specific location, and he quickly tells our protagonist to head there. As the chanting continues, the Skinner suddenly appears behind our protagonist. At that very moment, Zhao Mingyu appears beside the Skinner and launches an attack. The Skinner doesn't even dodge and takes the hit directly. Seeing this, Zhao Mingyu realizes that the man is completely focused on killing our protagonist. He didn't even bother avoiding her strike. At the same time, our protagonist leads the Skinner toward a room, but the Skinner confidently declares that he has nowhere left to run. When he enters the room, however, our protagonist is nowhere to be found. Furious, the Skinner demands that he come out. Meanwhile, our protagonist is already outside. He simply pulled a fast one on the Skinner. The souls continue gathering on the top floor of the mansion, and our protagonist leaves Zhao Mingyu to keep the Skinner occupied while he presses forward. Finally, he arrives at the destination. Fern is overjoyed because the souls are willing to give everything they have to summon him. Using the mansion's sound system, our protagonist addresses all the dead, telling them that the moment they have been waiting for has finally arrived. As Fern begins absorbing the souls, the Skinner somehow breaks past Zhao Mengyu and rushes straight toward our protagonist. Our protagonist fails to react in time. Watching the scene unfold, Zhao Mengyu can only call out his name as she believes he is about to die. Unfortunately for the Skinner, that isn't the case. The figure he kills is nothing more than an illusion. The real Shen Yu is already speaking to the lost souls of the mansion, urging them one last time to pour out their hearts and reveal their deepest desires. In unison, they all cry out for revenge. Just like that, the entire mansion echoes with the word revenge over and over again. Unaware of what is coming, the Skinner believes this is the perfect opportunity to kill our protagonist and mocks him for letting his guard down. But in the next instant, a massive sword pierces him from behind and smashes him into the ground, creating a huge crater. Xiao Mingyu watches in complete shock, unable to believe what she is seeing. Fern has finally emerged from the summoning circle in his true form. Standing on Fern's shoulder, radiating the energy of death itself, our protagonist declares that now is the time. Shen Yu looks down at the man who tried to kill him and calmly tells the Skinner that he will die before the very people he murdered for his twisted hobby. Meanwhile, the Skinner is horrified. Fern is not some ordinary undead. He is a calamity. Even more terrifying, this monstrous being was summoned by nothing more than a kid. In other words, the Skinner is completely cooked. Xiao Mengyu looks up at the colossal Fern and realizes in shock that this had been our protagonist's plan all along. Following our protagonist's command, Fern raises his massive sword and swings it at the Skinner. The Skinner quickly retaliates with his blood threads, but Fern is only mildly surprised. He scoffs, asking if this pathetic power is what the Skinner is so proud of. In his eyes, it's laughably weak. His aura alone effortlessly slices through every blood thread. The Skinner can only stare in disbelief. Unfortunately for him, this gives Fern an even better idea. He can still hear the lost souls of the mansion crying out and begging for revenge. Without hesitation, Fern casts a high-ranking undead spell, Resurrection. One by one, the souls of the deceased return to their bodies. Fern calls out to them, declaring that the hour of vengeance has finally come. Realizing Fern's intentions, the Skinner panics because he can no longer control the undead. Desperate, he tries to flee using his blood threads. Fern watches the pathetic escape attempt and mocks him. With a wave of his hand, he casts another high-level spell on the Skinner, rendering him completely unable to move. Fern calmly tells him to relax, explaining that it's only a temporary paralysis spell. The moment the Skinner crashes to the ground, Fern orders the victims he murdered to take their revenge. In an instant, the man becomes a buffet as countless undead swarm over him, each dragging at his body to claim a piece. Realizing that he's about to die, the Skinner desperately calls upon his god, offering everything he has in exchange. This catches our protagonist's attention. Just as Fern had predicted in the previous chapter, the Skinner's powers truly originate from another dimension. Believing he has been saved, the Skinner begins thanking the great being and eagerly begs it to descend, but nothing happens. His gratitude quickly turns to panic as he frantically wonders if the great being has rejected him. Shen Yu immediately orders Fern to restrain the Skinner. As soon as Fern does, our protagonist steps forward to finish the Skinner with nightfall. However, Xiao Mengyu suddenly senses that something is wrong and shouts a warning. Unfortunately, she's already too late. The Skinner calls our protagonist a fool because even if his god, the Lord of Divinity, hasn't descended, its shadow and presence alone are enough to protect him. Thankfully, that was just a clone. Our protagonist isn't that stupid, and the Skinner foolishly falls for the same trick. Our protagonist decides to kill him with a gun instead, but he accidentally hits an undead creature, causing him to lose the aura he had just farmed. Recovering from the embarrassment, our protagonist insists that Fern kill the bastard immediately. Just like that, Fern swings his massive sword and kills the Skinner, burning him to a crisp in the process. The moment the Skinner dies, the same shadow immediately shoots out of his body. Fern instantly senses the shadow's intentions. Because of this, he uses a high-rank defensive spell to protect both himself and our protagonist from danger. Naturally, our protagonist expresses his confusion, so Fern explains that if he hadn't used the defensive magic, that shadowy entity would have killed him. However, Xiao Mengyu suddenly points at something for them to see. Another shadowy entity is now carrying away the Skinner's corpse. Xiao Mengyu wastes no time and immediately follows after it. Our protagonist tries to stop her while asking Fern why they aren't chasing it themselves. Fern explains that he can't carry our protagonist while running. More shockingly, the shadowy entity carrying the Skinner's corpse isn't the same one that shot out of his body. That means if Fern leaves our protagonist alone, the other entity will definitely come back for him. Now our protagonist realizes that whatever that entity was, it was actually trying to help them. Using the sound system, he asks if anyone is watching them. When he receives no response, Fern suggests that he thank the mysterious person instead, because without their help, it would have been Zhao Mengyu who ended up in danger. With that, our protagonist thanks whoever helped them. Still, he gets absolutely no response when he asks the person to come out. Fern thinks it's for the best. At the same time, our protagonist overhears his bike arriving. Ghostfire reports that the mission has failed. It lost track of the little girl on the way to the Human Martial Arts Association. Our protagonist is genuinely confused. Fern is equally puzzled because the bike is incredibly fast, and for Ghostfire to lose her means the little girl is clearly no ordinary person. Just then, our protagonist's phone buzzes with a message. It turns out to be from Zhao Mengyu. The message reveals the truth behind the Skinner and the employer who wanted our protagonist dead. What our protagonist sees is a video in it. A group of men asks Song Qingyun what kind of boyfriend she would like to have in the future. Song Qingyun admits that she hasn't really thought about it. However, when they point out that she is about to turn 18 and that many noble young masters are already interested in her, she suddenly remembers someone. Apparently, she was among the noble children who once visited the Shen clan estate. More importantly, she remembers our protagonist protecting her and her sister from a mad dog when they were younger. So naturally, if she were to have a boyfriend, it would only make sense for him to be someone like our protagonist. The moment Song Qingyun says this, the screen goes dark. The next clip reveals the so-called employers. Shockingly, they are discussing our protagonist. After investigating him, one of them remarks that he is nothing more than an ordinary boy whose family was kicked out of the Shen clan. However, another man wonders what would happen if Miss Song became interested in our protagonist and decided to look for him. That is when they decide to hire someone. Since, in their eyes, everything can be solved with money, they plan to make our protagonist's death look like an accident. The video ends with the group laughing as they suggest sending someone to play with our protagonist. Meanwhile, Shen Yu stares at his phone as if it has betrayed him. The word play makes him grip the device even tighter. Our protagonist explains that ever since he was reincarnated into this world, he has gone through countless possibilities to understand why someone would target an ordinary teenager like him. Learning that this is the real reason behind everything is simply messed up. Our protagonist is pulled from his thoughts when the resurrected corpses call out to him. The group first thanks him for helping them kill the Skinner. However, they want to know if he understands why the Skinner murdered them in the first place. Our protagonist freezes. He knows that he was the Skinner's true target, yet because of him, so many innocent people lost their lives. In an apologetic tone, our protagonist hopes they will all be reborn and rewarded for the suffering they endured. As for himself, he swears that he will become stronger, and when that day comes, he will kill the bastards responsible for their deaths. He knows better than anyone how weak he is. He has to rely on Fern for protection and could not even chase after Zhao Mengyu. To our protagonist's surprise, one of the undead places a hand on his shoulder. No matter what happened, the undead thank our protagonist for avenging them. Soon, our protagonist is surrounded as the others offer their prayers and blessings. They hope he lives a long life free of hardship, believing that he will one day achieve his goal. They promise that they will be watching over him from the other side. With that, they thank our protagonist one last time before their souls begin to leave their bodies. Our protagonist also feels grateful. Thanks to their sacrifice, he was able to summon Fern. Speaking of Fern, he tells our protagonist that he made sure all of their souls returned safely, allowing them to finally rest in peace. In the next chapter, Zhao Mengyu finally returns to the Skinner's mansion. She is surprised to see that our protagonist is still there, but he immediately asks about the shadowy entity. Zhao Mengyu admits that she lost it, adding that it was for the best since it was tied to a calamity. When our protagonist looks confused, she explains what we already know about calamities, but also reveals that they radiate a strange energy, just like Fern. Our protagonist can still see her Holy Guardian title and its duration, causing Zhao Mengyu to thank him. She notes that this has increased her understanding, and she decides to return and train so she can become stronger. Our protagonist wishes her the best, but he still asks if she knows anything about the video she sent him. Hearing this, Zhao Mengyu falls silent before revealing that she has pieced most of it together. However, the truth is complicated, and she suggests that he stay out of it. In response, our protagonist demands to know the identities of the employers. When she refuses to answer, he angrily repeats the question. Finally, Zhao Mengyu reveals that the employers were nobles, but that's all she knows. However, our protagonist demands specifics, such as the name of the noble house. Zhao Mengyu urges him to let it go. She explains that even among nobles there is a hierarchy, and the gap between the Shen and Lu families cannot even be compared to the noble families that employed the Skinner. Nonetheless, she reveals that those nobles cannot escape punishment. Shen Yu immediately asks what that means. Sadly, it amounts to little more than a slap on the wrist and compensation for the Luo family and his own family. Hearing this, our protagonist wonders if this is some kind of joke. Not only did they fail to kill him, but they are practically erasing the entire incident. Zhao Mengyu explains that this is the price of knowing the truth. She reveals that Song Qingyun, the girl in the video, comes from one of the most powerful noble families, and many other noble houses have their eyes on her. She believes they should actually be grateful to the Skinner, because he was willing to betray his employers for his own twisted amusement. If someone else had taken the job, things would have turned out very differently. Now, she only hopes that with the truth uncovered, her brother's soul can finally rest in peace. Before leaving, she tells our protagonist to take good care of himself. As she begins to walk away, our protagonist asks what if things were different. Zhao Mengyu doesn't answer. To her, the nobles who hired the Skinner stand at the very peak of human civilization. They are basically invincible. Shen Yu becomes furious and asks if that means she is simply willing to accept everything that happened. He points out how many innocent people have died because of those nobles. They control vast populations, and the entire western part of the city was wiped out, meaning someone had to know about the Skinner's hobbies and chose to do nothing. All of this happened simply because they wanted to toy with him. He asks if ordinary people are worthless just because they are not nobles, nothing more than disposable tools. The moment our protagonist voices his desire for revenge, Zhao Mengyu furiously swings her sword, destroying almost half of the western side of the city. Of course, no one needs to tell us that she wants revenge as well. Our protagonist even notices that she is crying. Then, without another word, she suddenly disappears. Fern immediately teases him, pointing out that he just made her cry. Our protagonist decides that it's time for him to leave as well, but Fern asks what he plans to do about the mansion and everything that has happened. Our protagonist doesn't think much about it. The nobles were the ones trying to play with him, but Fern still doesn't understand. Our protagonist explains that it's something Fern could never understand because he isn't human. At this point, it's almost as if our protagonist is speaking a completely different language. To make things clear, he explains that since the nobles want to play games with him, he's going to play their game too. For us, that means our protagonist plans to become so powerful that even the world AI will back him. By that point, wiping out a noble family will be nothing more than an ordinary Tuesday. Of course, Fern believes him and likes the idea of getting revenge for all the innocent people they killed. After Fern returns to the storage ring, our protagonist thanks whoever helped him one last time before leaving. Shockingly, the person who helped him turns out to be the little girl who pretended to be the nurse's daughter. She sighs before dropping her disguise. Compared to when they were children, she thinks our protagonist has grown up, but somehow, he has become much dumber. Her headset agrees but wonders aloud if she doesn't plan to see him. She reveals that now is not the time. As expected, she turns out to be Song Qingyun's little sister. Her big sister had caused a big mess, but she doesn't seem to care at all. Hearing this, Song Yinshin tells her headset to stop ranting. It points out how they are risking exposure. The moment she mentions getting him some noodles afterward, the headset gets excited, only to immediately realize she wants it to do something. She nods. She wants it to clean up the entire mess, including all traces of her and Shen Yu's fight with the Skinner. The headset then asks about Zhao Mengyu, wondering if she will speak about today's incident. However, Song Yinshin is confident she won't. And just like that, the headset gets to work. Using its power, it repairs the Skinner mansion and wipes away all traces of the fight and destruction. At that moment, Song Yinshin's phone buzzes with a message. It turns out to be from her older sister, Song Qingyun, demanding she come quickly to help handle tonight's party. Seeing this, her headset asks if she plans to go. She refuses immediately and decides to get noodles for the headset instead. The reason is simple. Her older sister thrives in those kinds of events. Not to mention, everyone in the Song family already considers the little miss a waste of space. This makes her headset laugh. Later, inside a room where something twisted is happening. The Skinner suddenly emerges from a tub filled with blood. The Skinner can't believe he is alive again. Of course, this can only be the doing of his god, so he thanks the Lord of Divinity. To his surprise, however, the entity calls him a fool. As a result, the Skinner immediately drops to his knees, expressing thanks for not abandoning him. He notes that he has already paid the price as per their agreement and wonders why it didn't descend as he had requested. This immediately makes the entity furious. A mere mortal dares to question it? The Skinner instantly apologizes, saying he wouldn't dare question it, he was merely confused. Hearing this, the entity explains that there was an unfathomable force lurking in the shadows. That was why it didn't descend. The Skinner asks for forgiveness, admitting he didn't sense anything. The being replies that it wasn't his fault. His power was simply too weak. The Skinner listens as the being continues. Initially, it found this world uninteresting and weak. However, it never expected someone to counter the wicked curse statue it had bestowed upon the Skinner, even steal its power, and defeat the Skinner so quickly. In addition, there are other beings like itself that have descended to this earth and are operating in the shadows. At that moment, the entity stops talking, leaving the Skinner wondering where it went. But then someone opens the door to the room. The Skinner is visibly stunned to see Zhao Yibing alive. However, he soon realizes what is happening. Her body has been taken over by the great being, Zhao Yibing, now possessed by the Lord of Divinity. Thanks the Skinner for preparing such a suitable host body that perfectly suits its purpose. The Skinner feels deeply grateful to receive praise from his Lord. The Lord notes that it is new to this world and will need the Skinner's guidance. It is particularly interested in learning more about the protagonist. More specifically, it wants to know how the protagonist was able to overcome the curse from its statue and steal the power it had been gathering for countless years. Simply put, it wants that power back. To descend into this dimension and resurrect the Skinner, it had expended a significant amount of energy. That energy needs to be replenished with souls, just as the Skinner requires. Because it used a flesh puppet to bring him back to life. Once it grows hungry, it will devour the Skinner. Given the Skinner's current strength, he cannot afford to let it starve for long. This is why it wants the Skinner to hunt as many humans as possible. It will take their souls while the Skinner nourishes himself with their corpses. To the Skinner, this is the moment he has waited for his entire life. The next scene shifts to the protagonist arriving at the Human Martial Arts Association. The moment he lands on the rooftop with Ghostfire, a security guard immediately comes to investigate the noise. After listening to the protagonist's poor excuse of an explanation, the man insists that he not make such a racket in the middle of the night. Once left alone, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief. Just then, his phone buzzes with an incoming call. The caller is from the Shen family. The moment he answers and hears the voice, he realizes it is his first uncle. In his mind, he recalls that this man, his father's elder brother, had always cast cold glares at him, constantly ignored him, and occasionally mocked his father. Since the man handles the day-to-day affairs of the household, he begins by expressing concern. He mentions that when the protagonist's parents came to collect tonics and medicine, he was not around. The protagonist replies that he has already recovered and does not need to come over. Only then does the man reveal the true reason for his call. Apparently, the protagonist is being summoned to apologize to the same nobles who had attempted to kill him in order to clear up the misunderstanding, because he offended them. The protagonist finds this ridiculous. They only realize the need for this now, after Zhao Mengyu got involved. Worse, if he apologizes, it will make it seem like everything was truly his fault. The Shen family would naturally gain approval and favor from these powerful noble families. In turn, he would be hunted. In other words, they would have the perfect excuse to get rid of him. They could even come after his parents and Zhao Mengyu. Having seen through all of this, the protagonist asks his uncle to enlighten him because he has no idea whom he supposedly offended. Of course, the man becomes furious and insists that he does not need to know the details. The protagonist can only scoff inwardly. If he did not already know the truth, his uncle's remarks would make it sound like he really had offended someone powerful. Since the man is so fixated on making him return to the Shen family, the protagonist asks in the most polite tone possible who the bastard thinks he is to order him around. Ignoring his uncle's furious shouts, the protagonist mocks him further. If the uncle wants to please those noble families so badly, he should go to them himself and wag his tail like a good dog. Perhaps he will be rewarded. As a result, the man angrily ends the call, sneering that the protagonist dares to go against their grandfather's wishes. The protagonist feels a little bad because he was not done insulting the guy yet. Not long after, another call comes in. This one is a video call. The girls tell the protagonist they are having a private bikini party and invite him to come. Sure enough, the girls notice that their protagonist is quite handsome and urge him to come over. Shen Yu makes a reasonable excuse to decline. Instead of backing down, the girls decide to send someone to fetch him. Shen Yu immediately points out that he is a guy and is afraid of getting drunk and taken advantage of. Seeing that he can't get them to drop it, our protagonist decides the best thing to do is end the call. First his family, and now this. Our protagonist notes that this is only happening because they have found out about his actions. Now everyone wants to know the boy that the Song family's daughter is interested in. He can only sigh. Dealing with this is troublesome. In the end, he turns off his phone. But at that instant, the system reminds him that it is almost time to enter the nightmare realm, where he can obtain a title that grants a hidden ability. As for the condition, the system reminds him that he needs to obtain the One of Us title for the third time. Our protagonist thinks this is perfect. Since strength is the only thing that matters in this world, he decides to seize this chance. The moment the clock strikes midnight, our protagonist immediately summons the door to the nightmare realm. Once he enters, Fern somehow gets out of the storage ring by himself. Naturally, our protagonist asks how and why he did that. Fern simply tells him that it is time to depart. Our protagonist realizes that Fern can now move on his own. Fern explains that he is only leaving to head back to the undead, as he has some unfinished business to attend to. Our protagonist thinks this is where they will go their separate ways. Fern sincerely thanks our protagonist for helping him regain his full strength. As a token of gratitude and remembrance, he gives our protagonist his storage ring, and just like that, they wish each other farewell. Watching Fern leave, our protagonist hopes he will do well on his own. Unfortunately, he has spoken too soon. A massive explosion suddenly erupts from the direction Fern is heading. Coincidentally, Fern's voice can be heard coming from that area. Our protagonist doesn't understand what is happening. Judging from the power of the strike, he believes he stands no chance. He is about to bolt when the system immediately issues a warning. Running away now will result in a negative impact on the One of Us title. Our protagonist hesitates for a moment, then ultimately decides to help Fern, not because he is eyeing the title, but out of his own will. Right after making that decision, our protagonist is immediately captured. He watches in shock as Fern is reduced to what he once was. Hearing our protagonist call out to Fern, the leader of the undead is shocked that a human is calling an undead his brother. Recalling what happened in the Elven territory, our protagonist realizes that the undead are targeting Fern because the assassination mission failed, and he was the only one who survived. Fortunately, this gives him an idea. Our protagonist immediately switches to his Oscar-worthy acting, claiming that Fern actually saved his life. When he mentions that both of them plan to overthrow the human empire, the undead simply scoff and call them idiots. That's when our protagonist pulls out the Medal of Valor given to him by the prince. At first, the undead are skeptical, thinking our protagonist is trying to trick them. However, that thought disappears the moment the medal confirms that he was indeed recognized by Prince Norton. Now the group of undead begins to wonder if our protagonist is actually telling the truth. Because of this, the captain orders our protagonist to tell them everything. Our protagonist notices that the undead captain also has a title, and it's a high-grade one since it's purple. Still, he explains that he and Fern plan to infiltrate the human capital and assassinate the human emperor. The captain immediately grows furious and calls our protagonist a moron. Even if the medal is real, he questions whether he can actually pull something like that off. Our protagonist argues that he and Fern already have a solid plan. Now the undead leader is left stunned after reading our protagonist's recommendation letter from the prince to enroll in the Imperial Military Academy. When the captain asks about our protagonist's identity, he insists on knowing what they're doing with Fern first. Since things have reached this point, the captain explains what we already know about the Elven mission and how Fern survived by abandoning it. Hearing this, our protagonist lets out a mocking laugh, causing the captain to angrily grab him by the face. Demanding to know what's so funny, the captain is met with our protagonist's answer. He reveals that they should actually be thanking Fern because he discovered the Elven ambush in time. That's why he survived, and even managed to save our protagonist in the process. Turning to Fern, he explains that their real target wasn't even there, and that only the High Priest was present. When the captain demands proof, our protagonist suggests they confirm it themselves, since he's already well known in the human camp. The captain is even more shocked to learn that our protagonist is famous in the Elven territory as well. Our protagonist proudly declares that this is exactly why the prince gave him the Medal of Valor and the recommendation letter. On top of that, he even named him the boy who lived. As the undead begin to wonder if our protagonist has been telling the truth this whole time, the captain immediately orders one of his men to verify the story. Of course, he threatens to kill our protagonist if he's lying, but our protagonist isn't the least bit afraid. When asked why he would betray humanity, our protagonist simply answers that he hates being exploited by capitalists. Naturally, the undead have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So, our protagonist gives them an example. He explains that he's poor and doesn't have the tools needed to make money, while the people who do have those tools exploit him for labor and pay him next to nothing for his efforts. The undead are completely confused. One of them even asks the captain if he understands what our protagonist is talking about. The captain confidently nods and claims that this is exactly why he's the leader and why they should all hit the books more often. His subordinates immediately call him a genius. But the poor captain is sweating under the pressure as he tells our protagonist to continue because, at this point, he's just going with the flow. Just like that, our protagonist reveals that they made him work a 996 schedule. Thankfully, he doesn't mention 69. The undead immediately ask what that means, so our protagonist explains, working from 9 in the morning to 9 at night with less than an hour of rest, 6 days a week. The undead admit that's pretty rough. Then our protagonist casually mentions that he even had to endure a 007 schedule. The undead are horrified, believing our protagonist has truly suffered under these evil capitalists, since that would mean working around the clock, 7 days a week. Feeling genuinely sorry for him, the captain walks over and gives our protagonist a hug. Still, the undead captain wants to know how our protagonist survived all this time. Our protagonist puts on a pitiful act, narrating all the suffering he has been through and how he eventually met Fern, who helped and saved him. However, midway through his performance, he starts raging internally because the system just gave him yet another ridiculous self-made title. Just then, another undead arrives and confirms that everything our protagonist has been saying is true. This also means Fern was telling the truth. Their main target was never in the village, and the high priest has been waiting to ambush them. The captain processes everything and realizes he has screwed up big time. Initially, his orders were to execute Fern, but with this new information, Fern has actually made valuable contributions. If the higher-ups find out, he'll be in serious trouble. Not to mention, he's already beaten Fern half to death, and the poor guy is basically just a skull now. Knowing he can't be the only one to suffer for his own mistakes, the captain decides to honor Fern by giving him a medal for his service. The cheeky undead even gives them a thumbs up because he plans to leave our protagonist with Fern while he heads back to report everything. Our protagonist can't believe the undead are actually leaving him alone with Fern in such a state. He finds the whole thing annoying, but Fern points out that this is just how things work among the undead. Those left behind simply fend for themselves. Just then, Fern starts talking about capitalists, wondering if humans are really that terrifying. Our protagonist nods but reveals that it's not the humans of the nightmare realm. Confused, he asks if Fern is actually concerned. Fern confirms he is because our protagonist has no idea what he's just done. He explains that every race in their world learns from humans, and eventually, even the undead will end up with capitalists. Before our protagonist can reply, the system suddenly warns him that he's been spotted once again. At first, he assumes the undead have come back. However, both of them are shocked to discover they've been surrounded by the Imperial Army. Prince Norton immediately steps forward. At first, he's surprised, but his expression quickly turns serious as he demands an explanation from our protagonist, even threatening to execute him on the spot. Thinking fast, our protagonist introduces everyone to Fern, explaining that he's his informant and ally because the two of them have a contract. Of course, Prince Norton is skeptical since no human has ever formed a contract with an undead. Fortunately, the mage standing beside him confirms that our protagonist isn't lying. Using arcane magic, he verifies that his words are truthful. The soldiers are stunned, noting that it's exactly what they'd expect from someone personally acknowledged by the prince. Eudoria also appears behind our protagonist, revealing that she's inspected his soul with elven magic. She confirms that he's completely clean and shows no signs of darkness or corruption. Hearing this, the prince wonders if Fern's relationship with our protagonist is simply transactional, like a fair exchange. Our protagonist quickly explains that Fern is helping him because he's been treated unfairly by the undead. Thinking quickly, Fern comes up with the perfect plan. And by perfect, he decides to use our protagonist's earlier explanation about those heartless capitalists. Normally, Prince Norton wonders what Fern is talking about. And just like that, Fern starts describing the heartless capitalists among the undead. Since he's poor and worse, the undead don't need rest or sleep. They're forced to work overtime non-stop. The mage is immediately shocked because, in his eyes, that sounds like the perfect workforce to exploit. However, the prince wants to know what this 996 thing is. As expected, Fern gives the same explanation as our protagonist, except his version is way more polished and pitiful than our boy's. As a result, Prince Norton actually gives him a hug, noting that the poor skeleton has suffered a lot. Predictably, he then asks how Fern managed to survive all this time. To that, Fern tells the exact same story as our protagonist. However, our protagonist desperately tries to stop him from saying one particular part. Fern ignores him and concludes his story by revealing that he decided to rebel because of our protagonist. Thanks to that stunt, our protagonist's newly self-inflicted title somehow becomes even stronger. As proof that he's telling the truth, Fern shows off the medal he just received. The mage inspects it and ultimately concludes that Fern isn't lying. Prince Norton is left completely shocked, because this is the first time in history that an undead has willingly betrayed his own side to serve humans. And apparently, it's all thanks to our protagonist. Because of this, Prince Norton decides he wants to bestow a real name upon him. Of course, the soldiers are stunned. Watching the prince personally grant someone a name is considered a huge honor. He's about to call him Harry, but our protagonist quickly interrupts, begging him not to give him a name that starts with the letter H. The prince then suggests something even more ridiculous, making our boy wish he'd just accepted the first one. Since our protagonist still doesn't like it, Prince Norton turns serious. He decides to give him a name tied to their history and one of the god's children, and just like that, he officially names our protagonist, Peppa. Unfortunately for our protagonist, that's also the name of a pig-shaped hairdryer from his previous life. The prince, together with the soldiers, radiates a golden aura as our protagonist is also confirmed to be a saint and is asked to swear never to betray humanity. Impressed by his new title, our protagonist makes the oath and swears never to betray humanity. Once everything is done, the mage congratulates our protagonist, noting that he will no longer be called Peppa, because from now on everyone will address him as Saint Peppa. Of course, our protagonist is both stunned and speechless after hearing this. Seeing his reaction, the prince gives him a few words of encouragement and promises him generous rewards. In addition, he hands our protagonist an envelope. Apparently, the envelope is a special item that allows him to communicate directly with the prince. Our protagonist accepts it while promising to continue serving humanity. And just like that, the group decides to take their leave. Seeing our protagonist's expression, Eudoria assumes he doesn't know the significance of his name. Apparently, according to legend, those who bear the name Peppa possess the ability to shift weapons. Conveniently, this little detail wasn't mentioned by the prince. Our protagonist thinks that's pretty convenient, while Eudoria urges him to live up to his name. Anyways, when our protagonist asks if anyone else bears the same name as him, she thinks for a moment before revealing that he isn't the only one. Our protagonist doesn't even bother listening to the rest of her explanation, feeling relieved that he isn't the only one stuck with such a dumb name. Anyways, the group leaves, leaving only our protagonist and Fern behind. Fern wastes no time teasing him about the name. Our protagonist tells him to cut it out, while Fern jokingly wonders why he's so angry. Once again, he calls him Peppa. Our protagonist is just about to swear at him when something catches his attention. Our protagonist freezes as he notices that everything around him, aside from himself, has suddenly frozen in place. As for why this is happening, our protagonist has just received the One of Us title for the third time. As previously mentioned, earning the same title repeatedly grants a hidden ability. This time, the hidden ability is called Time Stop. Our protagonist can now freeze time within the corresponding dimension for 3 seconds. Unfortunately, the skill comes with a 1-week cooldown, causing him to immediately label it a worthless ability. However, he soon learns that the skill can evolve. As long as he continues earning the same One of Us title, Time Stop will become stronger. This activation doesn't even count toward its true growth, since it's merely a free trial. Nonetheless, time resumes, and our protagonist remarks that the 3 seconds passed surprisingly fast, leaving Fern completely confused. Our protagonist simply brushes it off before consuming the title and gaining 3 attribute points. With that settled, he finally tries to get some sleep, noting that it's already 6 o'clock. Unfortunately, he doesn't get the chance to rest. It's time to prepare for the Academy entrance exam. Just like that, our protagonist boards an airship heading for the examination site. While trying to catch some sleep during the journey, his phone suddenly buzzes, irritating him since he was just about to doze off. To his surprise, the message is from Zhao Yibing, asking to meet him privately. This leaves our protagonist wondering how she even qualified for the entrance exam in the first place. Not to mention, he finds it strange that she dyed her hair. A little confused, he asks director Qian if he knows anything about Zhao Yibing taking the academy entrance exam. Director Qian admits that he only recently found out. According to the report, Zhao Yibing had been hiding her true talent and was eventually recommended by the Archaeology Association. Much like the Human Martial Arts Association, the Archaeology Association is responsible for uncovering humanity's past and making important historical discoveries. Our protagonist never expected Zhao Yibing to have connections to an organization of that level. Wanting to confirm things, he decides to call Zhao Mengyu. Remembering how he made her cry, he's hesitant at first. In the end, he gathers his courage and calls her. The moment he asks if she knows anything about Zhao Yibing taking the exam, our protagonist is completely stunned by her response. According to Zhao Mengyu, Zhao Yibing is dead. Naturally, our protagonist is baffled. After all, she had just sent him a message. Instead of explaining, Zhao Mengyu immediately asks for his location. After confirming where he is, she suggests they meet up. Director Qian, who has been listening to the conversation, informs him that they'll arrive at the examination site in about 10 hours. Before hanging up, Zhao Mengyu strongly warns our protagonist not to meet Zhao Yibing alone because whoever contacted him is likely extremely dangerous. He agrees. After the call, Director Qian guesses that the person he was speaking with was Zhao Mengyu. When our protagonist confirms it, the director casually drops another shocking piece of news. It turns out Kunlun has officially registered Zhao Mengyu's breakthrough. To our protagonist, this confirms the effects of the Holy Guardian title's enhancement. During their conversation, he also realizes that Zhao Mengyu already knows the legendary swordsmanship techniques. Director Qian points out that this is perfectly normal. Children from noble families start their training much earlier, mastering both insight and resonance long before the academy entrance exams. Meanwhile, commoners like our protagonist only begin learning these skills after successfully enrolling. Our protagonist can only sigh, realizing he'll have to compete against monsters like them for a place in the academy. Director Qian quickly reminds him not to worry. After all, he has the full backing of the Human Martial Arts Association. Our protagonist, however, realizes the director is only saying that to stop him from changing his mind, so he doesn't hand back to the Shen family. Our protagonist is about to rest when his phone suddenly buzzes again. The message turns out to be from Zhao Yibing. Our protagonist doesn't understand why she keeps pestering him. Because of this, he sends a message explaining that he can't meet up because he is in Jiangbei. Within minutes, his phone vibrates again. Zhao Yibing points out the coincidence, noting that she also happens to be in Jiangbei and even knows his exact location. Our protagonist doesn't believe this is a coincidence. Just like that, he suddenly teleports to Nanshan Temple. As expected, his phone vibrates once more because, somehow, the girl just so happens to be there as well. Now, our protagonist is left wondering what kind of sorcery she is using to travel miles within minutes. In the end, he gives up trying to figure it out because he is too exhausted to even think straight. In truth, Zhao Yibing is actually exactly where she claimed to be in her messages. Apparently, they are busy hunting and killing humans on their way to the exam. In the next scene, our protagonist catches a glimpse of the original Shen Yu's memories. The memory is related to the time he saved the Song sisters when they were little. As a result, our protagonist ended up seriously injured. At the children's hospital, the doctor noted that he was lucky because if the injury had been a few inches off, he would have died. Anyway, the Song sisters came to visit him during his recovery. Both girls thanked him for saving them. Our protagonist gladly accepted their gratitude and exchanged cards with them. The flashback ends with him waving them off outside the hospital. Just then, Director Qian wakes him up and insists that he get something to eat. Our protagonist gets up, noting that the incident happened 10 years ago, and can only wonder what the girls look like now. Later, Shen Yu's eyes practically widen at the amount of food on the table. He thanks Director Qian while eating, but the man insists that he slow down. Not long after, our protagonist eats his fill and realizes that he can't eat another bite. Just then, a kid around his age appears and asks if he can have the remaining skewers. Our protagonist doesn't mind, and the boy immediately helps himself. Seeing the way the kid devours the food, our protagonist wonders if the airship doesn't feed its passengers. Director Qian then explains that the airship is currently carrying students from different schools who are all heading to take the academy entrance exam. The boy quickly confirms this. Just then, Both the boy and Director Kian notice the boy's teacher approaching. Master Yu Sihai is surprised that Director Qian somehow managed to recruit someone this year. Director Qian also points out that the master managed to recruit 7 students in such a short time. The 2 adults clearly have something on their minds. Because of this, Director Qian insists that our protagonist give them some space since they obviously have something important to discuss. Immediately, one of the master's students insists that our protagonist follow him. They soon arrive at what appears to be a hangout spot on the airship. Our protagonist watches as Guo Yunye pulls out a card and explains that when he asked for food earlier, he wasn't fooling around. It turns out he is completing some kind of quest. His mission is to eat food offered by candidates taking the entrance exam. Naturally, our protagonist asks what the deal is with the card. In response, the boy tells him to stretch out his hand. The moment he does, the card automatically duplicates itself. Our protagonist is impressed by the trick, to which Guo Yunye properly explains that it is part of the top 3 Academy rookie deck cards created by Tarot Tower. Our protagonist examines his mission card as Guo Yunye explains that he is only sharing this information because our protagonist helped him complete his mission. Seeing our protagonist's reaction, Guo Yunye tells him to complete quests and earn a place in the rookie deck rankings. Of course, when our protagonist looks confused, the boy is shocked that someone about to take the exams doesn't know something so basic. He explains that the Tarot Tower, the organization he mentioned earlier, is responsible for running the exams. They designed these cards as a support system for all participants. The deck cards assign random missions to every cardholder, and by completing them, a person can increase their rank. Naturally, higher ranks come with huge benefits, such as gaining recognition from one of the top 3 academies, receiving valuable information before the exam, and many other advantages. In other words, our protagonist quickly realizes that the key to passing, or rather gaining an edge in the exam, is to rank as high as possible in the rookie deck. As for his first mission, our protagonist begins thinking of a way to get 6 candidates to willingly participate in an event he hosts. Almost immediately, an idea pops into his head. Turning to Guo Yunye, he points toward the air vent. Then he openly challenges the boy, asking if he is confident enough to touch it. And just like that, our protagonist successfully baits Guo Yunye into playing the game. Sure enough, his attempt soon catches the attention of all the boys in the room. One boy thinks the challenge looks easy, but another quickly points out that the palm has to touch the ceiling vent, not just the fingertips. When the first boy insists that it is still no problem for him, the boy beside him thinks he is all talk. Just like that, the boy jumps into the game, leaving his friend behind. Another boy soon joins in. Seeing this, all the boys immediately begin participating in the game our protagonist invented. As for our protagonist, he simply stands there and notes that boys will always be boys as he effortlessly clears the first task. Now for the second task, he needs 12 people under conditions similar to the first mission. Not long after, our protagonist comes up with a perfect idea. After gathering some paper and writing down random statements, he returns and calls out to the boys. The boys immediately gather around him. Our protagonist then explains that, in order to protect their youthful years, Director Kian made him host a free relationship red flag workshop. The moment they hear it has something to do with dating, the boys become interested. They begin asking about the random statements and phrases written on the papers, to which Shen Yu explains that they are things girls would normally say to them. One guy immediately points at a particular statement in concern. Apparently, a girl once said the exact words written on the paper about liking his abs, and back then he had no idea how to respond. Funny enough, our protagonist, who died as a single bastard, is now out here giving relationship advice. The more he talks, the more the unfortunate boy becomes terrified for his future. Still, our protagonist encourages him not to dwell on a single mistake. After all, there are plenty of fish in the sea, right? Just like that, our protagonist smoothly shifts the discussion toward flirting techniques and pickup lines. Now, all the boys want to know how to handle certain situations when they are alone with a girl. Our protagonist's response is simple. They will figure it out when the time comes. Meanwhile, the girls watch from the side, completely confused about what the boys are even discussing. As for our protagonist, he successfully completes his mission. The entire time, Director Qian and Master Yu Sihai watch everything unfold. Surprisingly, the 2 of them were classmates and enrolled in the academy at the same time. In other words, watching our protagonist and the other kids brings back old memories. Just then, the master remarks that our protagonist has the potential to reach the 4-star level. Director Kian, however, expresses his belief that our protagonist has the potential to surpass even that. He then asks why his old friend recruited so many children this year. With a sigh, the man recalls a calamity that claimed the lives of several masters. It turns out the children under his care are the descendants of those fallen heroes. Even if they fail the entrance exams, he intends to ensure that they are admitted into top provincial academies. Director Kian raises an eyebrow because these exams are meant only for the best of the best. Although killing is prohibited during the examination, there have been incidents in the past. His friend understands exactly what he is implying. However, he explains that he is merely following orders from the government. Hearing that, Director Chian can only sigh. Later, our protagonist decides to get some fresh air and excuses himself from the group. Once alone, he notices changes to his rookie deck card. Our protagonist is stunned when the card displays his portrait because he looks like some kind of evil villain. Anyways, the card explains that he is currently a provisional card holder with 0 stars. This is because all new members who receive a card start at this level. Once he raises his star rating to 1, he will officially become a card holder. As a provisional card holder with no stars, he can only access basic information. Because of this, our protagonist's first question is about the importance of becoming an official card holder. The answer leaves him shocked. Being an official card holder automatically grants admission into one of the top 3 academies. Naturally, his next question is how many official card holder slots are available. The answer is even more shocking. There are only 54 slots. That means only 54 students can gain admission into the top 3 academies. Meanwhile, among all the candidates, more than 1,000 come from noble families, while common examinees like himself only number in the hundreds. Our protagonist can't help but wonder if this entire system was designed to prevent commoners from enrolling. Remembering that he can check information on other candidates, our protagonist decides to look up Zhao Mengyu. His card immediately displays her portrait, showing her standing like a swordswoman in the middle of a lake. She is already a 5-star official card holder. Our protagonist can't help but feel jealous of both her star rating and her impressive portrait. Without wasting any time, he sends her a friend request. Zhao Mengyu immediately accepts, and the two begin chatting. Of course, the first thing she wants to know is why his portrait looks so villainous. In response, he asks if it can be changed. Zhao Mengyu assures him that it will automatically update over time before suggesting that he check the rankings. After agreeing to meet each other later, our protagonist immediately follows her advice and opens the rankings. He quickly notices that Zhao Mengyu currently holds 5th place, which naturally makes him wonder who occupies the number 1 spot. That person happens to be the eldest son of the Nangong family. Obviously, the guy comes from a noble family. At first, our protagonist mistakes him for a girl. However, after reading the profile prompt, he is completely stunned. He can't believe the person is actually a man. Even more surprising is the fact that the same individual is ranked first with 6 stars. This causes our protagonist to wonder how exactly stars are earned. Wanting to test something, he performs the heavenly shattering frost moon technique. Although he knows the move is still incomplete, he decides to try anyway. The moment he finishes, the system notifies him that he has successfully gained a star. Just like that, our protagonist officially becomes a 1-star card holder. As for his newly unlocked privilege, he gains the ability to decline 1 challenge every hour. Predictably, our protagonist's portrait changes, but it still gives off the same villainous vibe. And of course, our protagonist doesn't like it. Just then, he accepts 2 friend requests. The guys are the boys he met on the airship, and they express their amazement that our protagonist is now a 1-star official card holder. Seeing their reaction, our protagonist wonders if it is really that big of a deal. At that moment, Director Kian comes out excitedly, shouting that our protagonist is now an official card holder. When our protagonist wonders aloud if it is really that significant, Director Kian notes that he doesn't understand. Simply getting into the rankings is enough to attract people's attention, even if someone gets knocked out shortly afterward. The fact that our protagonist entered the rankings so quickly causes Director Chien to admit that he has surpassed his expectations. Nonetheless, he points out that they have finally arrived. Our protagonist is surprised because this is the first time he has ever seen a floating island. Now it makes sense why they came by airship. Anyway, Director Chien explains that this is Cloudspire Port. He goes on to brief our protagonist about the history of the place and how the ruins eventually became a city. He even points out that one of the top 3 academies, Jialan Academy, is located within the floating ancient ruins. Both the teachers and students are responsible for researching and exploring the ruins. Director Kian explains that some of the greatest minds and scholars attend this academy. Just then, our protagonist notices projectiles heading toward them. Director Kian explains that they are the candidates' exam passes. Basically, this is how the examiners will be observing them. In addition, our protagonist is going to be rated until the start of the examination after the welcome banquet. Hearing that those with high ratings will receive huge benefits, Shen Yu naturally asks about them. Seeing this, Director Qian explains more clearly that after tonight's banquet, the candidates will be teleported to the exam site, and a high rating will come in handy. Because of this, our protagonist asks about the nature of the exam. Director Qian reveals that both the format and duration change every year. One year, it was a written exam that lasted 45 minutes. Another year, it was a wilderness survival test that lasted 3 months. Our protagonist realizes in shock that there is no way to prepare for such an exam, to which Director Qian assures him that he is already an official cardholder, meaning he will receive certain benefits. However, he admits that the benefits differ every year. Right on cue, something begins integrating with the card. The moment it does, our protagonist starts receiving ridiculous tasks, such as riding a dragon. Director Qian explains that the tasks come from the same tarot tower and that our protagonist should ignore them. Completing one would increase his rating, but the tasks are so impossible that only nobles usually attempt them. As already mentioned by the director earlier, the academy is practically reserved for nobles. However, it isn't long before our protagonist actually smiles because he finds a quest that is doable. He immediately becomes furious and insists that he should not accept it because the quest involves challenging another candidate to a duel. To explain further, Director Qian points in a certain direction and tells our protagonist to see for himself. Our protagonist is shocked to see one of his friends getting absolutely crushed. They have only just arrived. Yet the poor guy has already become an unfortunate victim of a noble. As for the noble, the boy sighs and calls the whole thing a waste of time, since his rating barely increased. Seeing our protagonist about to rush over, Director Qian stops him. He explains that the medical team is always on standby, and killing is not allowed during the examination. He tells our protagonist that this is simply how things are here, and he should not cling to the idea of fairness. In this place, strength is what dominates. The director admits that he initially didn't want our protagonist to take the exam, but knowing that he is constantly being targeted for assassination, he had no choice. In other words, our protagonist is going to stay here under the protection of the Academy authorities. Still, our protagonist is stunned because after checking his rating, the card informs him that he is doomed and that his life is constantly in danger. Although he knows he cannot be killed, our protagonist wonders why his life would be in danger. He cannot understand who could possibly be targeting him at this point. Just then, he receives a message from someone challenging him to a fight. The challenger turns out to be Xiao Mengyu. Naturally, our protagonist wonders why Xiao Mengyu is challenging him. Just then, someone waves at him. It turns out to be Xiao Mengyu, and she seems to be waiting for him. Seeing her expression, Director Qian decides to give the two lovebirds some space, while our protagonist insists that the man get his head out of the gutter because they are just friends. Meanwhile, both Xiao Mengyu and our protagonist inwardly confirm that the other has achieved a breakthrough. When our protagonist asks why she challenged him, Xiao Mengyu simply tells him to follow her instead of explaining. They eventually arrive at a building where they enter a training room inside. Xiao Mengyu explains that it is a training facility and that the soundproof rooms are perfect for training. Just then, someone is knocked out of one of the rooms and sent crashing through a wall. Naturally, our protagonist wonders what is happening. As the dust settles, the girl who was thrown out angrily asks why those noble bastards keep picking fights with her when they know they are stronger. The group shamelessly claims that they are simply farming ratings, which is obviously the truth. Just then, one of them locks eyes with our protagonist. The leader immediately thinks he has struck gold since he has just run into another one-star card holder. However, Xiao Mengyu immediately steps forward and tells the fool to back off. Slightly irritated, he says he will let her go first. To everyone's surprise, Xiao Mengyu declares that our protagonist is hers, as if he were her personal property. Furious, the boy immediately shifts his attention and attacks her instead. Unfortunately for him, Xiao Mengyu is so fast that she has already swung her sword while he is still in motion. Her strike tears apart the boy's clothes without causing him a single injury. The entire group, including our protagonist, watches in shock. Our protagonist quickly realizes that her swordsmanship has become far sharper and more precise than before. Seeing the overwhelming gap in strength, the fool immediately bolts. Feeling both curious and concerned, our protagonist asks whether they are really going to fight. In response, Xiao Mengyu asks if he is actually scared, noting that at worst he will just end up stripped like the other guy. Seeing his expression, she quickly nods and admits that she is only teasing him. It turns out the real reason she challenged him was to prevent anyone else from targeting him. For some reason, our protagonist feels a little disappointed, and we already know exactly why. Anyway, our protagonist realizes from Xiao Mengyu's explanation that this is actually a loophole to protect themselves because the card only shows that the two of them are engaged in a duel. According to Xiao Mengyu, the only way to end the duel is for someone to defeat her. Although our protagonist knows she is doing this for his sake, he cannot help but wonder whether this will eventually become troublesome. Our protagonist listens as Xiao Mengyu explains that not everyone is interested in fighting or farming ratings. For instance, the guy from the Nangong family will definitely not participate because he is far too proud to do something like that. Because of this, our protagonist asks what she will do if a rating farmer eventually surpasses her. Xiao Mengyu casually replies that she will simply defeat that person and take back her position. To this, our protagonist thinks it is actually a perfect plan. Eventually, they arrive at their training room. Inside, our protagonist notes how impressive the room is and briefly considers renting one for himself someday. However, Xiao Mengyu immediately points out that it is impossible because he would never qualify for one. Our protagonist is instantly furious when he learns that the rooms are reserved exclusively for nobles or five-star card holders. Shifting the topic, Xiao Mengyu suddenly brings up Zhao Yibing. Naturally, our protagonist wonders what happened to her. Xiao Mengyu explains that there is a high possibility that the shadowy entity has possessed Zhao Yibing's body. In other words, if her theory is correct, then the Skinner may still be alive. Hearing this, our protagonist immediately voices the same conclusion. Xiao Mengyu believes this is the case because Zhao Yibing is also participating in the academy entrance examination. For that reason, she wants our protagonist to be extremely careful. Upon hearing this, our protagonist decides that they should report the matter to Kunlun since it is far too serious to ignore. Unfortunately, Xiao Mengyu reveals that she has already done so and received no response. Reporting it to the police would also be useless. Furthermore, Xiao Mengyu explains that the Skinner is connected to someone extremely powerful. That connection is the reason he was able to kill so many people. During all of his activities, communication networks and surveillance systems were mysteriously cut off. Of course, our protagonist is stunned to hear this. To make matters even worse, he learns that several noble families have already approached the Luo family with marriage proposals. As a result, Xiao Mengyu may be forced to marry a man in his 50s. The mere thought alone disgusts our protagonist. Unable to understand it, he asks why she cannot simply refuse. Xiao Mengyu points out the obvious. She is too weak. That is precisely why she used the academy entrance examination as an excuse to buy herself more time. By the time she graduates, she hopes to become strong enough to stand against them. Hearing her plan, our protagonist finally breathes a sigh of relief. At the same time, he cannot help but think that these noble families are far too ruthless. Even a once-in-a-generation sword prodigy like Xiao Mengyu is not spared when family interests are involved. Pulling him out of his thoughts, Xiao Mengyu asks whether he has decided which academy he wants to attend. Our protagonist admits that he has not really thought about it yet. Xiao Mengyu decides they should forget about that topic for now because she wants to teach him a technique instead. With that, she demonstrates her family's sword technique. Our protagonist is completely stunned. Noticing his reaction, Xiao Mengyu smiles and asks whether he wants to learn it.